Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Annie Kasperzak. Annie Kasperzak was born on January 10, 1997, into a family that lacked love. Her parents suffered from severe drug addiction and mental health issues. Therefore, her living conditions since childhood have always been difficult. At a young age, she was removed from her parents' care and placed with a new family. However, things did not go smoothly, and her foster parents abandoned her just like her biological parents. As a result, by the age of 9, she had lived in 9 different families. Annie felt unwelcome and alone in the world, and her life in the orphanage had made her distrustful of people. Despite this, she held on to the hope of finding a loving family, one that would embrace her and provide the love she longed for. She dreamt of having a dad and mom who would care for her, accept her as their own. After Annie was returned by her 9th family, she went to an orphanage where she met Veronica Kasperzak. Veronica worked in Utah's social services, focused on finding suitable homes for children who had been cruelly treated. She was known as a very caring worker for Child and Family Protection Services. She treated everyone she helped with genuine love. Upon meeting Annie, she was immediately touched by the girl's story. Annie told of being physically abused as a child. She lived in a cruel, unstable family, which had a great impact on her psychology. Veronica was moved to tears as she listened to her story. Veronica felt that life was unfair to she, and her tragedy touched Veronica's heart. As a result, Veronica and her relationship became close and warm. Veronica began visiting she regularly to provide her with emotional support. In January 2007, while 6 months pregnant, Veronica shared Annie's story with her husband, Dennis, who also longed for children. They decided to adopt Annie and welcome her into their family. Veronica and Dennis were kind and decent people, which allowed them to carry out their plans smoothly. Annie moved in with their family in the suburbs of Salt Lake City, Utah. A few months later, Veronica gave birth to twins, both boys. By this time, all the bureaucratic hurdles related to Annie's adoption had been resolved, and she was warmly welcomed into the family. Even though this was her 10th time being adopted, she was full of enthusiasm and hope that the hardships of her life were behind her. She believed that now she would experience the love of her parents. Now that Annie had a home, wonderful parents, and 2 younger brothers, she embraced her role as a caring older sister. She happily babysat her younger siblings and helps her foster mother. Veronica, her brothers take up most of her free time, and she felt fulfilled in this new role. She tries to broaden their horizons and teach them new things every day. She sincerely loved her new brothers, and they returned her affection. Not long after, Annie experienced her first trip to the beach. It was a family holiday before Christmas, and Veronica and Dennis organized a wonderful celebration for their children. They spent most of their time opening gifts. But during this period, tensions began to arise within the family. Veronica and Dennis believed that having children would strengthen their relationship and help them learn new aspects of family life. Unfortunately, this was not the case. After a while, Veronica and Dennis's family had a falling out, which led to many difficulties. Veronica, who had witnessed similar situations in the past, feared that her family might fall apart again, even after their divorce. Dennis kept a good relationship with Veronica and remained involved in raising their children, including their adopted daughter, Annie. Fortunately, Annie's fears of returning to the orphanage did not come true. Meanwhile, Veronica started new relationships and eventually remarried. Her new partner, James, turned out to be a loving and caring husband and father. Just like Dennis, he quickly bonded with Annie and treated her as if she were his own daughter. Family affection and warmth gradually returned to their lives, and the family moved to a peaceful small town in Utah called Riverton. It was an ideal place to start a new life, but this story would not have a happy ending. James admits, Annie has special gifts. She could convince anyone to do anything. especially when it came to asking for gifts one day. She saw a pair of red shoes in a store she really liked, and she begged James to buy them, and he couldn't refuse. At this time, 15 years old, Annie was in her first year at the academy. She was an outstanding student. Well liked by her teachers, she dreams of becoming a pediatrician. Due to her life experiences as a child, she always wanted to help other children. Veronica, her adoptive mother, was a guiding light for her. Transforming her life, she dreamed of emulating her mother. By dedicating her life to helping others, she even imagined adopting more children to study with them at home and support them during this time. Annie also had her first love. These feelings came on suddenly, and she embraced them wholeheartedly. On the evening of March 10, 2012, she stayed home to look after her younger brothers. Because Veronica and James had gone out for dinner, this was a romantic date that they had long awaited and planned. When Veronica and James returned home, everything appeared normal. The only thing Veronica noticed was that Annie had changed from her usual shorts into jeans, which she thought was likely due to the chill. However, she didn't think much of it. Eventually, she decided to take a shower, while Annie went into her room to listen to music. After she finished her shower, she went into the room to check on Annie, but found it empty. She couldn't find her daughter in the house. Worried, Veronica and James began looking for clues to see where Annie had gone. James carefully inspected her room and discovered a note under her pillow. In the note, she explained that she could no longer stay at home and had chosen to run away to California with her boyfriend. She admitted that she was pregnant and asked her parents not to look for her or report her missing to the police. This shocked the family. They could not believe that this was happening to them, so they continued to search for information. A few months before these incidents, Annie began having sex as the escape date approached. She noticed strange changes in her body. She felt weak, nauseous, and dizzy. Occasionally, she felt unwell for no apparent reason. Eventually, she thought she was pregnant, but when she took a pregnancy test, she got a negative result. The pregnancy test results show that Annie is not pregnant, which worries her because she has been mentally preparing to become a mother. Despite this, her decision to leave seemed strange and surprised her parents. Veronica and James, they had always provided her with love and support, and she appeared happy in their family. Often caring for her younger brothers, they felt her decision to leave was sudden and unprepared, as she had not shared with them her current situation or future plans. Naturally, her parents, Veronica and James, were concerned about her leaving. With her phone turned off, they quickly reached out to the police for help. Their biggest concern was who she ran away with. The police and her parents began contacting her close friends. While still attempting to reach her by phone, however, she ignored all their calls and messages. Annie's boyfriend was Darwin Christopher Bagshaw. They first met during a math class at school and quickly developed an attraction. Their secret relationship lasted a year and a half before it was discovered. It was surprising that Annie's parents were unaware of her feelings, as she had kept her romance hidden from them. According to her best friend, she was deeply infatuated with Darwin and feared losing him during their time together. Their group of friends changed, as Veronica and James were unaware of the new friends Annie made. Then, Veronica managed to reach Darwin, suspecting that he might have run away with her daughter, Annie. Everyone was surprised when Darwin declared that he did not know where Annie was. He revealed that their relationship had ended, and at the time, she disappeared. She was dating someone new named LJ. Veronica and James were completely unfamiliar with LJ. They had never heard of him, while Veronica was reaching out to Annie's friends and acquaintances to learn more about him. James managed to track Annie's mobile phone using an app. He monitored its movement in real time on a map for a while. The phone was moving quickly. It was clear that Annie was not driving, but after a while of observation, the signal suddenly stopped and then disappeared. Veronica and James are unable to contact Annie until now. She had ignored all their attempts to contact her. They hurried to the store, searched the supermarket, and asked everyone if they had seen her. They showed photos of her, but no one recognized her. After reviewing the security camera footage, they still couldn't find her. Veronica continued to call out to her daughter, but she still did not respond. They are very worried, but still hope that everything will be fine with their daughter and wish for her to come home. On March 11, the day after Annie went missing, a man contacted the police. He noticed blood on the riverbank and initially thought it was from a wounded wild animal. When he got closer, he saw another pool of blood and a red shoe nearby. He found this suspicious, so he called the police. Forensic experts arrived at the scene and collected samples for analysis. The results showed that the samples belonged to the same person, because the last location Annie was seen coincided with where the blood was found. Investigators became suspicious. A search operation was soon organized. Divers were mobilized to examine the river, while others searched the shoreline. A rescue helicopter was also dispatched a few kilometers north of where the shoe was found. A girl in a red dress was found floating face down in the water. When the search party pulled her body from the water, they were unable to identify her. Her face was so badly disfigured that a forensic examination was needed to identify her. Most of her facial bones were crushed, and her nose was almost gone. The cause of death was determined to be multiple blows to the head with a blunt object, and that she had died the night she went missing. It was clear that she had died tragically after the body was discovered. Police reported through the media that they had found a girl of Asian descent with dark hair, believed to be under 20. When Veronica and James saw the news, they quickly recognized that it was their daughter, Annie. Although physical features do not match Annie's, but James recognized the red shoes he had given his daughter before she disappeared. Additionally, Veronica noted that the deceased wore a red dress that perfectly matched the one missing from their home. Veronica and James initially hoped it was just a coincidence and that the police had found another victim, but they felt uneasy. Identifying the body took time. It was determined that the victim wore braces and had her gallbladder removed, which matched Annie's details perfectly. Ultimately, dental records and DNA analysis confirmed that the body was Annie's at that moment. Any hope of Annie returning home vanished, and her parents were devastated afterward. Detectives went to Annie's home to search her room. They looked for any evidence that might help identify the criminal. During the search, they discovered a diary in which she wrote about her on-and-off relationship with Darwin on her 15th birthday. Annie expressed her desire to have children, yearning to be a young mother and care for her child. On March 1, 2012, she wrote that she was pregnant by Darwin. However, she later regretted it when a pregnancy test came back negative. She explained that she had been using birth control pills. The autopsy confirmed that she had never been pregnant. Further entries in her diary showed that she was wrong and just wanted to believe in her dream. She hoped this would help keep Darwin by her side, but he had no intention of building a real family with her. Veronica and James informed the police about their conversation with Darwin on March 14. Detectives spoke with Darwin. He was accompanied by his father, Spencer. He was aware of the rumors about Annie's pregnancy, but insisted he could not be the father. He believed that she had become pregnant by LJ, who was 17 at the time. He did not know LJ personally, but described LJ based on rumors, saying LJ was a man of bad reputation. However, he was unable to provide any further information to the police. The police also questioned Darwin about his whereabouts during Annie's disappearance. He claimed to have an alibi, stating he was at his grandmother Wilma's house. He mentioned that he briefly visited a friend that evening, but returned home when he found him not there. His grandmother verified his account. Additionally, he agreed to provide DNA samples from the clothes and shoes he wore on the night of the incident. When he handed over his sneakers, he mentioned that there might be some of Annie's blood on them because her nose was bleeding during their last meeting and stuck to his shoe. Her father was present and confirmed his statement. As a result, he was confirmed to have an alibi and was removed from the list of suspects. Spencer, Darwin's father, was asked to provide information about the relationship between Darwin and Annie. The detectives specifically wanted to know about someone named LJ. He did recall a message he received through social media back in November. That was sent from Annie's account, but signed by LJ. At the time, he thought the message seemed odd. Additionally, he has heard disturbing rumors about LJ, suggesting that LJ may be involved in a gang or even have committed murder. On March 15, Spencer again contacts the police to report that a mysterious individual named LJ has threatened to kill his son, Darwin. Darwin informed he about the threat when he returned from work, prompting he to report it to the police immediately. At a press conference, the authorities shared the available information. They appealed to the public for any tips that could aid in capturing the criminal. Unfortunately, this did not advance the investigation. The situation changed when a witness named Joanna Franklin contacted the police. She was in custody for fraud, but claimed to know LJ. She provided a brief description of LJ, saying he was a short man, about 20 years old. She also said she had more information about the case, but would only share it if the police dropped the charges against her. Ultimately, the police were forced to accept her request. Joanna then revealed that on the night of the murder, Annie and LG went to Daniel Robert Ferry's house. Daniel had a criminal record and was at the time engaged in the distribution of illegal substances. She was present that evening and witnessed LG and Annie go to the bathroom together, where they had sex. Afterward, they returned. Daniel then approached Annie and asked her to have sex with him. She laughed, thinking it was a joke, but then refused him. In anger, he grabbed her head and slammed her against the wall, causing blood to splatter all over the wallpaper. She collapsed onto the carpet, blood flowing from her broken nose, mouth, and ears. Daniel did not stop there. He kicked her several times, threatening that no one was allowed to laugh at him. She lay unconscious. Joanna went to check her pulse and saw that she was still alive, but Joanna did nothing. Because Joanna was afraid, Joanna noticed that Annie was still on the floor, her face very pale, but she was still breathing. The other teenagers at the party believed she was dead and showed no concern for her well-being. LJ returned to the room and saw the bloody scene. Daniel explained that he had taught Annie a lesson for laughing at him. LJ reacted calmly to Daniel's actions, and they began discussing what to do with Annie's body. Joanna watched as they wrapped she in a large towel, loaded her into a car, and drove away. A few hours later, they returned without Annie. When asked about Annie's, they claimed they had gone swimming near the canyon, saying that she had regained consciousness but then fought with them and ran away. Joanna and the others realized this was a lie and understood they had disposed of her body. The police asked Joanna about Annie's clothing. Joanna described she as wearing a lot of red, shoes and a dress. Coincides with how she was discovered to verify Joanna's statement. Investigators went to the home of dealer Daniel. He denied any involvement in the crime and claimed he had not harassed or harmed anyone. Detectives obtained a search warrant for his house, anticipating they would find blood on the walls and carpet. However, they discovered that the wall Joanna mentioned had been recently painted, and the carpet was missing, according to police experience. It appeared that the house had been renovated in a suspicious manner. During a thorough examination, forensic scientists discovered stains on the floor that looked like blood. As they continued their investigation, they became increasingly convinced that Joanna was telling the truth. Daniel was arrested and brought in for questioning. Witness testimony confirmed that Daniel was indeed a gang member and had a criminal record for drug trafficking. During the interrogation, he was accompanied by his lawyer. He denied knowing LJ and Annie. Even when shown a photograph of her, he insisted he did not know her name and maintained that he did not kill her. Despite Daniel's convincing testimony, detectives still suspected his involvement in Annie's murder. The lab results from stains collected at his house revealed they were not blood, but sauce. Aside from Joanna's testimony, there was no evidence to prove his guilt, forcing the detectives to release him. Later, they discovered that, during this time, he committed another crime. he may have been involved in an attack and kidnapping that took place in a nearby city, raising the authorities' suspicions even further to clarify Daniel's whereabouts. Authorities examined location data from his phone. The data showed that on March 10, the day Annie was murdered, he was in another city. After months of searching for evidence, investigators could not connect him to the crime, leading to his removal from the suspect list. Ultimately, Daniel confessed to the kidnapping and assault of another person, which he committed with a friend around the same time as Annie's murder. Proving they could not have been in two places at once, this indicated that they were not involved in Annie's death. The police reinterrogated Joanna. She admitted that she had made up the story. She wanted revenge on Daniel and knew that on the night of Annie's murder, he had kidnapped someone else. Her accusation misled the police, diverting their focus and allowing the real culprit to evade justice. Her lie wasted over a year of police investigation. Additionally, there were no leads on LJ, who had vanished without a trace. Tragically, the detective in charge of the case was killed while on duty, and the investigation was handed over to a new officer. Unfortunately, significant information was lost with the deceased detective. In this context, Annie's family felt deeply affected and decided to offer a reward for anyone who could provide information leading to the arrest of the killer. A new investigator has begun to review all documents related to the case. He reread Annie's diary and noticed that a couple of months before her death, she had an intimate relationship with Darwin. Afterward, she had thought she might be pregnant, but that turned out to be a misunderstanding. It seemed that she wanted to use the child to keep Darwin with her, which could have been the motive for the murder. On the night of the murder, they had multiple calls with each other. That evening, her phone received 3 calls from an unknown number. The phone companies have been monitoring these calls and discovered that they came from Darwin's number. It seemed that Annie and Darwin had had an argument and were trying to mend their relationship over the phone. The police decide to reconsider Darwin's alibi, as he is the prime suspect and has a motive for the crime. By tracking mobile calls, they discovered that his grandmother and father were lying. He was not with them that evening. They were only trying to corroborate his alibi and protect him. Furthermore, there was a lot of blood on his shoes, which made people even more suspicious of him. Meanwhile, his family seemed to be protecting him. After speaking with Darwin's father, Spencer, who was pressured by the detectives, he admitted that he had lied to the police 2 years ago. Upon reviewing messages between he and Darwin, they discover that Darwin asked him to create a false alibi to fool the police. The new investigator was surprised to learn that some friends referred to Darwin as LJ. The key piece of evidence against Darwin came from his cell phone location data. At the time of Annie's murder, it showed that he was at the riverbank where the body was found. This seemed to confirm that the case was finally solved. At the time, he was living with his mother in Colorado, prompting police to arrange an interview with him. When detectives approached him at the school, he appeared surprised. He refused to speak to them without a lawyer. He was extradited back to Utah in October 2014. Although he did not cooperate with the police, there was enough evidence to press charges against him, and his trial was set for March 2015. According to state law, Dennis was supposed to be tried as a minor, which would have allowed him to be released by the time he turned 21. However, this was not permissible given the seriousness of the crime. Therefore, the prosecution, with the backing of Annie's family, requested that he be tried as an adult. He was held in prison while awaiting trial. During this time, he confided in a fellow inmate, revealing the disturbing details of the murder. In his confession, Darwin explained that he had believed for a long time that Annie was pregnant. He was distressed at the thought of becoming a father at such a young age, especially since he had not yet completed school. To get out of this situation, he planned to kill Annie and suggested they meet by the river to discuss running away from home. She naively believed his lie when she arrived at their meeting place. She was dressed very beautifully. Darwin then attacked her, striking her in the face with a shovel multiple times. After she fell, he continued to hit her with the shovel. Finally, he placed the flat side of the shovel on her head and jumped on it until she no longer showed any signs of life. Experts confirmed that the injuries on she matched the actions described by Darwin. After Darwin confessed to the crime, the court decided to try him as an adult. Because his actions were so heinous, he was charged with first-degree murder. The defense lawyer argued that he did not understand his actions and felt remorse. However, Annie's family believed that he was just trying to gain sympathy to receive a lighter sentence. In the end, Darwin Christopher Bagshaw was sentenced to life in prison. With the possibility of parole after 15 years, he will be eligible for parole in 2034. Additionally, his father and grandmother faced charges of perjury and obstruction of justice, each receiving a 2 years prison sentence. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Michelle Herndon. Michelle Herndon was born in 1981 in a small Florida town with a population of just 7,000. After finishing school, she enrolled at the University of Florida in Gainesville in 1999. Michelle joined the Peace Corps as a volunteer, assisting both people and animals. Michelle suffered from chronic, debilitating migraines. These attacks caused her to experience severe pain on a daily basis, accompanied by symptoms such as nausea and extreme sensitivity to light, smell, and sound. Despite trying medications, herbal teas, and numerous visits to the doctor, nothing helped ease her pain. In 2005, a new school year began. Michelle returned to university to continue her studies. To cover her tuition and rent, she worked at a fitness center. With limited funds, she rented a small apartment far from campus. At that time, Michelle was in a complicated long-distance relationship with a guy named Jason. Her best friend, Jessica, whom she met at university, lived on campus. They worked together, talked frequently, and often visited each other. Jessica's roommate was Oliver O'Quinn, a 27-year-old student from Georgia. Oliver was a great roommate and a friend to both Jessica and Michelle. The three have often spent time together. Michelle shared her relationship problems with Jason, and Jessica was always supportive. Oliver offered advice from a male perspective. Being a bit older and more experienced, they often valued his wisdom. Oliver, a nurse in the hospital's surgical department, began helping Michelle manage her debilitating migraines after learning about them. The hospital provided strong medications that greatly relieved her pain, allowing Michelle to finally enjoy life without those severe headaches. Surprisingly, Oliver had previously served in the Air Force and worked in Africa. Michelle dreamed of moving to Africa to help animals. She and Oliver could talk endlessly about it. Michelle decided to take a break from her long-distance relationship with her boyfriend, Jason. During this time, she met Scott, a funny musician who played guitar in a band. Michelle felt very comfortable with Scott. However, in mid-October 2005, Jason returned and pleaded with Michelle to reconcile, and she agreed. She began making plans to spend Thanksgiving together. Meanwhile, Oliver was not impressed with any of Michelle's boyfriends, considering them frivolous and unreliable. The reason was that Oliver was in love with Michelle. Many acquaintances had suspected this for a while, noting the way he interacted with her and the way he looked at her. Oliver was constantly involved in her relationships and even accompanied her on dates, which seemed awkward, but Michelle didn't mind. She believed that they were just friends and didn't see anything wrong with that. At the end of October 2005, Michelle met with Jessica to share some exciting news. She and Jason had decided that she would move in with him, 500 kilometers away. Jessica was thrilled for Michelle, congratulated her, and asked about Oliver, but Michelle didn't respond. Michelle began getting ready for the move, balancing her busy schedule of studies, work, volunteer activities, and now packing and buying household essentials. Despite the hectic pace, she enjoyed these tasks. As a result, Michelle and Jessica saw each other less frequently, usually only catching up during their weekend volunteer work. They planned to have dinner together on November 9, 2005, looking forward to catching up and sharing stories. However, Michelle didn't show up for the meeting that evening, which was uncharacteristic of her. Jessica tried to call her friend, but she didn't answer. She assumed Michelle was upset about something and believed that was why she didn't show up. Jessica left several messages asking Michelle to explain what happened and why she was upset, but Michelle never responded. Jessica decided not to wait any longer and went home. When she got home, her phone was dead, so she charged it and went to bed. The next morning, on November 10th, Jessica discovered many voice messages on her phone. One was from the fitness center where both girls worked. The administrator asked about Michelle's absence, as she had not been at work for a couple of days. Their shifts didn't overlap, so they didn't see each other at work, leaving Jessica unaware of Michelle's absences. Understanding the significance of this project to Michelle, Jessica became anxious. She worried that something might have happened to Michelle. Jessica tried calling Michelle again, but there was no response. She then reached out to all her friends, but none of them knew where Michelle was. Concerned, Jessica got into her car and headed to Michelle's house to check on her. Meanwhile, after learning about her daughter's disappearance, Michelle's mother also drove to another city to find her. The drive took about an hour. When Jessica, who arrived first at Michelle's residence, got there, she saw police officers had sealed off the area as a crime scene. It was then that she received the heartbreaking news: Michelle had died. Nearby, she noticed a distressed Jason. Michelle's mother later arrived at the house and made the horrifying discovery that her daughter was dead. There was no sign of forced entry into the apartment. All the doors and windows were closed, the lights were off, but the TV was on very loudly. Nothing had been stolen. Police found the body cold, indicating that Michelle had been dead for some time. She was lying face down with her left arm underneath her body. There were no wounds, bruises, or injuries that would indicate a violent death. It appeared that Michelle had fallen asleep and never woke up. Police believe that Michelle, 24, died of natural causes. Her body was sent for an autopsy and police conducted standard procedures, interviewed neighbors, and asked forensic experts to examine the scene. No fingerprints or DNA were found near the body, and neighbors did not hear or see anything suspicious. Police believe Michelle had used illegal drugs and died of an overdose. Police searched the apartment for drugs or paraphernalia but found nothing. There were only a few bottles of beer in the refrigerator. Next to Michelle's body on the bed was a half-empty beer bottle, which had only her fingerprints on it. As a precaution, the opened bottle was sent to a lab to be tested for any foreign substances or possible poisoning. Tests showed that nothing had been added to the beer. The medical examiner was unable to determine the cause of Michelle's death. She appeared to be completely healthy, with no illnesses other than migraines, which were unlikely to have been a significant factor. This led to many questions about how a young, healthy girl could fall asleep and not wake up. The position of her body was unusual for a natural death, raising further doubts. The expert concluded that Michelle died on the night of November 8th. The medical examiner is continuing a more thorough investigation to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, the police are looking into who she might have been in contact with around that time. Initially, questions emerged regarding Michelle's boyfriend, Jason, who was the first to arrive at her apartment and call the police. How did he end up there when he lived 500 kilometers away in a different city? Police brought Jason to the police station for questioning. Jason explained that he hadn't been able to contact Michelle for 2 days. Concerned, he drove over 5 hours overnight to check on her. Upon arriving on the morning of November 10th, he knocked on her door, but no one answered. He continued calling and knocking without success. Seeing Michelle's car in the parking lot, hearing her dog barking inside, and her phone ringing, he feared something was wrong. Looking through the window, he saw Michelle lying motionless on the bed. He then immediately called 911. The police arrived, broke down the door and found Michelle's body in the apartment. Jason appeared very sad and distressed. He had an alibi for the time of Michelle's death because he was in another city, so the police released him. The medical examiner provided new information after a careful examination of Michelle's body. A small needle wound was found on her left hand, located under her body. Police contacted her doctor to see if Michelle had undergone any tests or procedures the day before, but the doctor said no. The needle wound was in an unusual location, atypical for an injection. No illegal substances were found in her home and toxicology tests showed no illegal substances in her system. Police also observed that a trash bag may have been missing from Michelle's apartment. They speculate that someone injected something into Michelle, causing her death, and then threw the trash bag away to remove the evidence. Police searched the trash cans on the street near her home and found Michelle's trash because it had not been collected. They found checks and letters with her name on them, along with a syringe and a bottle of painkillers. This prescription drug is very dangerous and an overdose can be fatal. Toxicology testing for this drug had never been done before because it requires a special test. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy had never encountered this drug in her many years of practice. When the final test was done, it was found that Michelle's body contained a very high concentration of the drug, which caused her death without leaving any trace. This drug is not commonly used for general use. It is mainly used by anesthesiologists during surgery. The police interviewed Michelle's friend Jessica and learned about her complicated relationships with Jason, Scott, and Oliver. This information intrigued the police, as they suspected that one of these men might have harmed Michelle out of jealousy. However, who could it have been? Jason had already been ruled out as a suspect. According to a friend, Michelle's relationship with Scott was very brief and hadn't really developed. He understood when Michelle returned to her ex and stayed out of her life. Michelle was deeply in love with Jason and wanted to be with him, while she saw Oliver as just a friend, although he wanted more from her. Oliver soon became a suspect. In hindsight, Jessica realized there were many warning signs in Oliver's behavior. He followed Michelle everywhere, but it seemed sweet and innocent, so no one saw him as a threat. During a conversation with the police, Michelle's grief-stricken mother mentioned that the last time she spoke to her daughter was around 11 p.m. on November 7th. This made her the last person to speak with Michelle. Michelle's final words to her mother were that Oliver was supposed to come over to help her fill out some documents. The police found it strange that she invited a guy over late at night, especially when he had feelings for her and she didn't like him. There had to be a reason for this. It was revealed that Oliver worked in the hospital's surgical department and had access to a variety of drugs, including painkillers. He had previously helped Michelle with her migraines. Michelle's landlord, Peter, came to the police station to share a strange story about her. About a week before Michelle died, Peter needed to pick up some things from her apartment but couldn't get in touch with her. This was unusual for Michelle, who always paid her rent on time, kept the apartment clean, and didn't ignore him. Concerned, Peter went to the apartment and knocked on the door, but it took a long time for anyone to answer. Finally, a shirtless man with messy black hair and glasses opened the door. He looked outside for a moment and said that this wasn't a good time. Peter explained that he needed to get his things. However, the man slammed the door shut and told Peter to come back in a few hours. Peter was confused and did not understand the situation. After he left, Michelle called him back to apologize for the unpleasant situation. She explained that she had a severe migraine and her friend was treating her. Peter saw a picture of Oliver and recognized him as the man in Michelle's apartment. The police found a butterfly needle in Michelle's bag at her apartment. This type of needle is often used to inject drugs. Jessica confirmed that Oliver had given Michelle medication to relieve her migraine. Jessica also mentioned that Michelle was afraid of regular needles, so Oliver used a small butterfly syringe instead. Michelle could not inject the needle herself because she was too afraid to even look at it. If she injected the drug incorrectly, she would die immediately. So the drug was administered by someone with medical knowledge. This again pointed to Oliver's involvement. The police finally understood why Michelle had remained friends with Oliver and invited him to her home. He had provided her with a strong painkiller. Police did not find Oliver's fingerprints on the syringe or vial. He may have worn gloves and disposed of them elsewhere, leaving only Michelle's DNA. To charge him, the police would need to link the syringe to Oliver. The vials had a unique identification number, indicating they came from the department where Oliver worked. The drugs were stored in a special refrigerator that required a patient number and staff name to retrieve the drugs. This discovery confirmed that Oliver had taken the vials. Later, the police went to the hospital to talk to Oliver, but he did not show up for work. It was discovered that he had been fired on November 9th, shortly after Michelle's murder. Police suspected that he had been fired for using dangerous drugs, but hospital management denied this, saying that Oliver had been fired because his skills did not meet their standards. However, rumors circulated in the hospital that Oliver had been fired due to a shortage of medication. The police found out that Oliver was working at another clinic. They went to the clinic and spoke to a nurse who was surprised to see them. Oliver was then taken to the police station for questioning. He said that he had heard about Michelle's death from someone and expressed his condolences. The police were surprised and asked if they were close friends. Oliver replied that they were just acquaintances. The police then asked why he talked to her on the phone every day. Oliver did not answer. Instead, he said that he had to get back to work and left. At that time, the police did not have a warrant for his arrest. Oliver calmly arrived on campus and collected his things. The guy told Jessica at the end that he was going on vacation and left. It turned out that Oliver went to visit his ex-wife and daughter and then flew to his homeland in Ireland. There, he received a license and got a job at the hospital. After the police took the bottle of painkillers used on Michelle for analysis, the DNA test results came back. Confirmed that there was Oliver's DNA on the bottle cap, indicating that he had injected Michelle with a fatal dose of the drug. The police discovered that Oliver had left but was unable to act, despite having a warrant for his arrest. Extradition to the United States is often controversial for countries that oppose the death penalty. In this case, an Irish journalist alerted the police to Michelle's story. He proposed publishing an article detailing Michelle's death and highlighting Oliver's possible involvement, including his photograph and arrest warrant, to alert the public. The police approved and the article was published in April 2006. Upon reading the article, Oliver fled the country to Africa, where he had previously worked, fearing public backlash. He was eventually tracked down, arrested, and extradited to the US, where he was jailed. Oliver was charged with Michelle's murder but pleaded not guilty. His lawyers argued it was an accident, claiming that Michelle had requested Oliver to inject her with drugs for pain relief. That evening, Oliver miscalculated the dose, inadvertently giving her a lethal amount, leading to her death. The dose administered was 4 times the lethal amount, which was surprising since no one could believe an experienced nurse familiar with the drug would make such an error. Oliver did not apologize to the deceased's family for this mistake. The prosecutor had a different theory, suggesting that Oliver killed Michelle out of jealousy and revenge, as he did not want to share her with another man. It was alleged that he deliberately gave her the fatal dose with the intent to murder. During the trial, witnesses stated that Oliver was in love with Michelle and had been stalking her. Additionally, Oliver's cellmate testified that Oliver confessed to being deeply in love with Michelle, but she did not return his feelings. Oliver overheard a conversation between Michelle and Jason, where she professed her love for Jason and said Oliver meant nothing to her. Feeling humiliated by this, Oliver allegedly decided to take revenge by ending her life. Oliver had gained Michelle's trust through his medical care. However, he exploited this trust by injecting her with a quadruple lethal dose of medication. As a result, the jury convicted Oliver O'Quinn of first-degree murder, and he received a life sentence without the chance for parole. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Christina Purcell. Christina Purcell, a 41-year-old veterinarian, worked at a clinic in the small town of Greer, South Carolina, which has a population of 35,000. Her colleagues all described her as an exceptional person. She was regarded as the best in her department and was highly experienced. She had a great sense of humor, which helped alleviate challenging situations at work. Her co-workers respected her, and management highly valued her talents. Christina had a young daughter, whom she co-parented with her ex-husband, John Mello, during the early years of her life. Friends and acquaintances all agreed that her daughter meant everything to her. After their daughter's birth, Christina and John separated but maintained joint custody. Then, she was engaged to a new partner named Bradley. Despite an apparently perfect life, but she was involved in a custody battle with her ex-husband, John, and the custody dispute between them was intense. On October 5, 2021, when their daughter visited her father, John, he flew her to Italy. This prompted Christina to file a complaint against him for violating custody, which further strained their relationship. Christina even launched a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for her legal expenses, and many people contributed. On October 13, 2021, Bradley, aged 65, tried calling Christina's in the morning. After she failed to answer, he went to her house. He knocked, and when there was no response, he entered through the back door. Inside, he discovered a horrifying scene. Her lifeless body was in the living room with rose petals scattered around. So, he immediately called 911, but it was too late to save her. Police discovered over 30 stab wounds on her body, mostly on her head, face, and neck. Although the scene was chaotic, it did not resemble a typical robbery. The police found unusual mystical objects in the house, hinting that someone unstable might have conducted a sacrificial ritual. This led investigators to consider the possibility of a ritual murder. Forensic experts determined that Christina was murdered elsewhere. Evidence of dragging was found throughout the house, and in some areas, the body was left behind and placed in various positions, possibly to take photographs of sexual acts. Later, the body was moved to the living room and covered with rose petals, with petals also strewn along the path where it was dragged. When information about the incident leaked to the press, they dubbed it the Rose Petal Murder. At that moment, the police have not found any signs of forced entry into the house. However, Bradley, who alerted emergency services, had entered through the back door. He informed detectives that this door was always left unlocked, suggesting the intruder could have entered the same way. At the crime scene, detectives discovered clear signs of staging that complicated their investigation. They had to sort through numerous conflicting pieces of evidence to discard the irrelevant and find the right direction. Detectives have never encountered such complex and confusing murder cases before, making it difficult to determine which lead to pursue. They suspected that the murder was intentional. The perpetrator had specifically gone to Christina's house to commit it. And detectives must find out his motives and who he is. Inside the house, they found memory cards and the laptop in the living room near the body. A transparent handbag containing a powerful illegal drug was also discovered. There were small droplets of dried blood, and Christina's mobile phone lay nearby. In the hallway, a bag was found with 2 white envelopes, each containing $500 in cash. A suitcase held a firearm, a single-shot self-defense pistol, and numerous documents related to a court case involving Christina's daughter, prompting detectives to consider the possibility that her ex-husband, John Mello, was involved. Forensic experts used luminol to examine the entire house, enabling them to detect even the smallest traces of blood. They discovered hundreds of tiny blood spots in various places, highlighting the attack's brutality. Christina suffered a significant loss of blood and endured severe pain before dying. She was stabbed 31 times. The police scrutinized Christina's mobile phone for any leads. Initially, detectives focused on whether her partner, Bradley, who found her body, might be involved in the attack. To compare information, they also retrieved his mobile phone to analyze its contents. Police noticed peculiar behavior from he was highly agitated. His reaction didn't seem like that of a grieving fiancé. He was trembling, inconsistent in his statements, and wore gloves throughout his interactions with the investigators. This behavior only heightened the suspicion of law enforcement. Later, it became clear that their suspicions were justified. While investigating Christina and Bradley's devices, the police uncovered shocking details about Bradley's life, clarifying his nervous behavior. They had strong reasons to suspect that he was exploiting her daughter, Jane Doe, to create explicit content. In February and August, he recorded videos and took photographs of Jane nude in various inappropriate poses. These materials were found on the phone and laptop that were confiscated for examination. However, it is not clear whether this was done secretly or with her consent. Doubts emerged after the police discovered more disturbing information from Bradley's laptop that revealed unsettling aspects of the intimate relationship between Christina and he. The police uncovered increasingly disturbing information, including a new type of victim, animals. Numerous photographs were discovered showing individuals involved in sexual acts with animals, mainly dogs. Shockingly, Christina, one of the clinic's leading veterinarians, who occasionally took animals home for temporary care, was involved in these acts. According to state law, such sexual offenses can result in up to 5 years in prison, and the offender must pay a fine of at least $500, which may be increased at the court's discretion. Law enforcement described these recordings as some of the most repulsive materials they had ever encountered. The public was outraged upon learning that Christina, a seemingly kind woman from a veterinary clinic, was involved in such acts with her daughter and dogs. After discovering all this evidence, Bradley Post was arrested on October 19, 2021. He was charged with the sexual exploitation of a minor and the distribution of explicit materials. It emerged that he not only created photos and videos but also sold them. Additionally, the police considered the possibility of his involvement of Christina's death, but he firmly denied any involvement. Detectives found no evidence linking him to the murder. There was no trace of blood on his body or clothes. Furthermore, Christina had died several hours before he arrived at the house, leading the police to doubt his connection to the murder. Christina's ex-husband, John Mello, is also a suspect in the case. His main motive was gaining full custody of their daughter, which he did not want to share with Christina. This is a common motive for murder. However, at the time of the crime, John was in Italy with his daughter. This alibi was easy to verify since he hadn't returned to the country. Despite this, investigators kept John on their list of suspects, considering he might have orchestrated the crime indirectly. John returned to the country on October 21, 2021, a week after Christina's murder. Following his return, the police obtained a warrant for his detention. He sought help from his best friend, Zachary Hughes, who was 29 years old at the time. Zachary seemed suspicious to the police, so they looked deeper into his background. He was born and raised in Morro Bay, California. The turning point for him came in 2005 when his parents vacationed in Virginia. During this trip, they adopted 5 children from Russia. These children had suffered abuse in their previous foster families, resulting in physical and psychological trauma. The adoption aimed to teach Zachary and his brother Ellie about morality and to provide the adopted children with a safe, loving, and stable home. Zachary and Ellie struggled to communicate with their new siblings, leading to frequent family conflicts due to misunderstandings. Zachary's entire family worked on the farm, but he had a special talent: he studied music. His parents bought him a piano, and he became very skilled at playing it, which was especially noticeable in high school. He started participating in music competitions and won first place at the Southeastern Piano Festival. He has achieved great success, even performing a solo program with the South Carolina Philharmonic Orchestra. In 2010, he applied to the Juilliard School in New York, where Irina taught piano at an advanced level. Not only was Zachary accepted, but he was also offered several scholarships for his exceptional talent. Thanks to his exceptional talent, Zachary outperformed all his classmates and became the only student from the USA selected to participate in the International Music Festival in Kyoto. Only 11 people from around the world were chosen for this event. Those who know he say he is a loyal friend, highly moral and very good at communication. In his free time, he used his skills to help those in need, often performing for free at rehabilitation centers, nursing homes, and hospitals to bring joy to people. By 2018, Zachary enrolled in a master's program in piano performance at the university. At that time, he had a strong desire to help people globally. This led him to volunteer for the United States Marine Corps and apply to a military educational institution to become an officer within a year. He understood the intricacies of military service, but at the start of his second year, he suffered fractures in both legs. This injury forced him to halt his studies and receive the title of Hello. Around this time, a woman reached out to Zachary, seeking a talented pianist for a church in Greer, South Carolina. He accepted the offer and moved there to perform regularly. And he received half of the donations collected from churchgoers. Initially, this provided a good income, but by the mid-2020s, the pandemic significantly reduced the number of church attendees. As a result, he had to find new income sources. He began giving solo performances throughout the city and state and took on additional part-time jobs. Additionally, he started a blog offering valuable piano lessons. To support his performances, he acquired portable electrical equipment, which provided him with the necessary mobility. While living and working in South Carolina, Zachary met John, Christina's ex-husband and a former music producer. John supported Zachary by helping him with performances and offers him a part-time job. Between mid-2020 and 2021, when he assisted John with household chores, which deepened their friendship. He became John's closest friend. As a result, the police questioned him about his possible involvement in Christina's murder, wondering if John could have asked him to do such a thing. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed CCTV footage from a camera located near Christina's house. A camera installed in the peephole of the house opposite captured all the incident outside Christina's home on the day of her murder. The footage showed a stranger wearing dark clothing and a hooded jacket entering her house around 10 a.m. A few hours after, the stranger left on a bicycle, this time wearing a mask. Christina did not leave the house, and no one else visited until the next day, when Bradley arrived and found her dead. This evidence cleared Bradley from the list of suspects in the murder case, although he remained in jail on other charges. Investigators suspected that a stranger in dark clothing, captured on camera, was the killer, but they couldn't identify him. His face was covered, and there were no distinguishing features on his body. They then requested footage from surveillance cameras along the bicycle paths to trace his movements and began reviewing the recordings. This process was lengthy but fruitful. The bicycle appeared in several videos, including one where the stranger in black was loading it into the back of his pickup truck. Although the grainy footage obscured the license plate, the model, make, and color of the truck matched Zachary's vehicle. It seemed he was involved in the brutal murder of Christina's. The police obtained a warrant to search Zachary's house. There, they found a bicycle identical to the one used by the attacker. They seized Zachary's computer for examination. Through this, they discovered active correspondence between John and Zachary, uncovering over 1,700 text messages, most of which were encrypted. The messages were clearly coded and contained hidden information. Additionally, some texts were jumbled. They probably did this to distract the police if the police suddenly contacted them. Detectives found the following clues in the messages. On April 17, 2021, 6 months before Christina's death, John asked to host a party for her. This message was not encrypted. On the day of the murder, John asked a friend how the musical performance went, and the friend replied that everything was great. Although it seemed like a harmless question, the police discovered there was no performance that day. They suspected that John used performance as a code word for the murder of Christina. All other information on Zachary's phone was either encrypted or deleted. He also used an access code unknown to the police, which complicated and delayed their investigation. Additionally, they couldn't obtain data on the device's location at the time of the attack on Christina. The phone was frequently switched to flight mode, including when the mysterious masked man came to Christina's house. It appears this was done on purpose to prevent Zachary from being tracked and to avoid involvement in the crime scene. Based on the evidence collected, officers obtained a warrant for Zachary's arrest. While they were preparing to file charges, Zachary was invited to perform on an international cruise. By the time the warrant was issued, he was already in Europe, so the detectives had to wait. Fortunately, when the charges were filed, Zachary had returned to Michigan, unaware that they were planning to arrest him. He could have easily left the country by crossing into Canada or taking another flight to a cruise ship. However, once he learned about the charges, he voluntarily returned to South Carolina and surrendered to the police, believing they were mistaken. On November 3, 2021, Zachary hired lawyers to defend his reputation, stating he was not guilty of any wrongdoing and intended to refute the slander tarnishing his name. However, he refused to allow the police access to his phone, prompting them to file a court petition. The court subsequently ordered full access to the mobile phone. Despite this, he repeatedly provided incorrect passwords, which delayed the investigation. Finally, by April 8, 2023, after approximately 700,000 attempts, the smartphone was unlocked. The police discovered crucial messages between John and he, discussing their encrypted plans to kill Christina. While these messages were intended to be used as trial evidence, they were considered circumstantial and insufficient to determine the trial's outcome. Zachary and John were known for their impeccable reputation, supported by many witnesses, and had no prior criminal history. The jury could not rely solely on correspondence and footage of a similar car to convict them. More new evidence emerged when a forensic examination uncovered the criminal's DNA under Christina's fingernails, which matched Zachary's DNA. Consequently, the police could confidently assert that he was the one who attacked and brutally killed Christina in her home. The defense argued that the CCTV footage did not clearly show the criminal's face or accurately identify the car involved. As a result, they labeled the evidence as circumstantial, as initially assumed. They emphasized that Zachary had no prior legal issues and was described by friends and acquaintances as a kind person incapable of committing a violent crime. Additionally, there was no apparent motive for him to attack Christina. and the lawyers rejected the DNA test results, claiming the samples were tampered with or contaminated. From the outset of the trial, once the public became aware that Zachary, the renowned musician, might face imprisonment, the court received numerous letters from dissatisfied people. These letters came from former classmates, teachers, Zachary's friends, and even people who didn't personally know him but admired his musical talent. Among the supporters were also numerous employers who praised his skills. Collectively, they vouched for his character, adamantly believing that someone as talented and kind-hearted could not be a murderer. In total, the court received over 50 such letters. The lawyers emphasized that Zachary had no previous legal issues. He had served in the U.S. Army, having volunteered and pursued education to become an officer rather than just serving as a private soldier. Additionally, Zachary could have avoided any legal troubles by simply accepting an invitation to return to work on a cruise liner. However, he chose to return to his home state and turn himself into the police as soon as he learned about the charges against him. He was fully aware of everything, including the warrants that the police were obtaining to investigate further. Despite this, he wasn't deterred because he believed he was innocent. The lawyers presented this as key evidence of his innocence. Zachary requested to be released on a $100,000 bail so he could be placed under house arrest with his parents until the trial, allowing him to stay in a calm environment where he could play his favorite instrument. He also agreed to have no contact with the families involved in the case. However, the court denied his bail request, leading to his transfer to prison. He remains there, awaiting trial set for 2024. He continues to deny any involvement in Christina's death. John also denies all charges. During a conversation with investigators, he explained that he fled to Italy with his daughter. He said he was exhausted from legal battles with his Christina and was horrified to discover that her fiancé, Bradley, had inappropriate intentions towards his 9-year-old daughter. Evidence suggested Christina was involved, as she appeared in some photos with her daughter. So John claims he took his daughter away to protect her from Christina, her unstable mother. He intended to challenge for custody using the explicit photos taken by Bradley and believed he had a strong case. If Christina lost custody, John would have no motive to harm her. Nevertheless, John repeatedly insisted he would fight for his daughter at any cost, despite he not commenting on his connection to Zachary. The prosecution believes Zachary is involved because his DNA was found under Christina's fingernails, indicating she resisted him. He may be either a co-conspirator or a victim of John's manipulation. The investigation into Christina Purcell's death has become intricate, full of unexpected developments and mysteries. Detectives persist in seeking justice for her, gradually assembling clues to identify the mastermind and uncover the case's dark secrets. Although the journey to bring justice to she may be long, but it will certainly not stop. The investigation team hopes that the case will soon be illuminated, allowing she to rest in peace. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Katie Passanides. Loretta had no interest in her child, Katie. Loretta was just 15 years old when her daughter was born. Right after the birth, Loretta abandoned her daughter, and the father's identity was unknown. Consequently, Katie's grandmother took her in and cared for her. They formed a strong bond, and Katie always thought of her grandmother as her mother. When Katie turned 15, her biological mother, Loretta, re-entered her life. At that time, Loretta was 31 years old and had been living with a man named Ernest later for almost 10 years, even taking his last name. Although they were never officially married, they referred to each other as spouses. Shortly after reuniting with her mother, Katie decided to move in with her and Ernest. However, the family reunion did not go as smoothly as hoped. Their life changed significantly when she moved in. As a teenager, she began to rebel. Her mother and Ernest had trouble communicating with her. She often ran away from home, attended parties, and only called parents by their first names. The family never developed a close relationship with her. The situation changed when Katie started college. She changed from a rebellious person to a more docile person. Being very intelligent, she was accepted into several prestigious institutions. She graduated with a degree in chemistry and earned a doctorate in applied mathematics from Johns Hopkins University. While still a student, she met a young man named Anthony Passati, who would later become her husband. Anthony recounted that she was the first person to approach him to ask for gum, which led to their acquaintance. Their friendship soon blossomed into a romantic relationship. A year later, Katie and Anthony got married, and 2 years after that, they had a daughter. At that time, she was 27 years old. The family eventually moved to San Antonio, Texas. Here, Anthony worked as a physician assistant, and he had good career prospects in the medical field. Katie taught chemistry and mathematics at several schools, earning a good salary. She had a stable career, but she decided to leave her job to become a mother again. Family was always important to her, so she decided to adopt a little girl. During this time, Katie tries to reconnect with her mother, Loretta. Even though they rarely communicated with each other before, but now they are both trying to get closer. Loretta began visiting Katie and grandchildren frequently. By then, Loretta was already retired. Loretta and Ernest lived on a 25-acre estate in a small town called Keithville. They built a log house and a large barn for agricultural equipment. Ernest manages a small farm, which was an excellent way to earn extra money during retirement. In 2008, a major change occurred. A local mining company exploited a large gas field on the farm. To obtain the extraction permit, Ernest was paid $400,000, and overnight, made him quite rich. He invested the money in his own business. Since he already had everything he wanted, he continued managing his small company as usual. Everything seemed normal, but a new problem arose. One day, Loretta called Katie and asked her a strange question. She couldn't remember how much sugar she needed for the cake. From that moment on, her calls became increasingly strange. It seems that with age, she began to have memory problems. The same happened to Ernest. One day he went with Loretta to their daughter's house, Katie, for Thanksgiving. But halfway there, he suddenly stopped. It seemed that he became disoriented and got lost. Then, he turned the car around and went back home. After these incidents, Katie sent Loretta and Ernest to the hospital for examination. The doctors diagnosed they with the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Katie still keeps in regular contact with Loretta, calling her almost every day, as she was very worried during this time. To help with the housework, they hired Tina Van Moer-Keek, who moved to the farm with her husband, Chris, and their child, living in a trailer. Tina became Loretta's personal assistant and driver, as Loretta had completely lost her ability to drive. Meanwhile, Chris helped with the housework for the Luttrell family and worked on the farm where Loretta and Ernest lived. Ernest and Loretta's health rapidly deteriorated. Their memory issues became more severe, so they need more maids to do housework. They were frequently busy dealing with various matters. Ernest became irritable, visibly losing his memory. His awareness became muddled, and he became more aggressive. He blamed the neighbor for all his troubles. Katie has talked about this many times. In April 2010, Ernest went to his house and accused his neighbors of trespassing on his property, leading to a scandal that got out of hand. Katie, who was visiting Loretta, called the police and reported that Ernest had threatened to kill his neighbor. Sheriff's deputies detained Ernest and took him to the nearest medical center, where he underwent a psychiatric evaluation and received treatment for a while. His condition was poor, and upon arrival at the medical center, he was confused and did not know why he was brought there. While Ernest was in the hospital, Katie decided to help her mother, Loretta, solve the problem. She went to the medical center and presented a power of attorney over Ernest's property, which he had supposedly signed earlier. Katie insisted that Ernest remain in a nursing home for Alzheimer's treatment, as his behavior was unpredictable and aggressive. She felt that he could be a danger to himself and to others. However, he denied having threatened his neighbor or having had a conflict. According to him, he did not understand why he was in a medical facility and demanded to be sent home. The situation was unclear. Had Ernest really signed the power of attorney and just forgotten, or is there another motive in this? However, Katie kept him in the hospital for observation for a week to determine what was wrong with him. Throughout this period, even without treatment, he remained completely clear-minded. Ultimately, Ernest was discharged from the hospital because there was no reason to keep him there any longer. Shortly before noon on July 25, 2010, Loretta called 911. She reported that her husband, Ernest, had passed away. At first, it seemed like a typical report of someone who had died of natural causes. However, there was a hint of unease in her voice. The emergency services dispatcher asked Loretta to try to give artificial respiration to Ernest. However, she replied that it would no longer help and asked the rescuers to come with the police as soon as possible. The sheriff's deputies arrived at the crime scene within minutes. Outside the house, they found Loretta. It was known that she suffered from Alzheimer's. She encountered the police and seemed more confused than upset. She obviously didn't know what to do. The officers entered the house to investigate and discovered the body of Ernest in a pool of blood. Doctors confirmed his death, caused by 5 gunshot wounds. According to Loretta, when she returned home from church, she found the body of her husband Ernest lying in a pool of blood. She did not know what had happened to him. Her statement was confirmed by other parishioners. Indeed, she had been at church. Reinforcements were called to the scene. When the forensic experts arrived, they immediately began examining the crime scene and collecting evidence. They noticed that some valuables were missing from the house, including Ernest's car. Near the place where the car had been stolen, they found unusual boot prints with a unique design. Tina, the housekeeper, and Chris lived on Ernest's farm. They claimed they were not at the house during the murder and provided a store receipt as proof of their whereabouts, which confirmed their alibi. Meanwhile, detectives reached out to Loretta's closest relatives. They later learned she had a daughter, Katie, who lived in San Antonio, Texas. Upon hearing the tragic news, Katie traveled to support her. Investigators are currently having difficulty clarifying the incident. What happened at the farm that day? At the scene, police confirmed that Ernest had died tragically. It certainly wasn't him who ended his life, as there was no weapon nearby. Someone had killed him, and the gun was hidden by the killer. Finding the gun became a priority for the investigation because it could offer important clues. Ernest was shot at point-blank range, including in the head, leaving no chance of survival. He was found lying in a pool of his own blood, and the gun cabinet next to the room had been opened and emptied the ammo. Additionally, Ernest's pickup truck and several valuable items were missing. The truck was easy to locate because it had distinctive features, including a homemade fuel tank. Ernest used this tank to refuel his agricultural equipment. It had a large capacity, designed to supply equipment for 2 days. Thanks to these unique features, the truck was quickly found. Eric Crane was well acquainted with the police officer because he abused illegal substances. He had a rich criminal history, mainly due to his addiction and drunk driving. All his life, Eric was in and out of prison for short periods of time. He was found just 2 days after the murder. He was immediately arrested in the car and taken to the police station for official questioning. However, he began to categorically deny his involvement in the incident. He claimed that he was at work at the time, but his alibi was not confirmed by his colleagues. Besides, he also could not explain how he ended up driving Ernest's pickup truck. His boots had a unique pattern on the sole, resembles shoe prints found at the crime scene. However, at first they could not get him to confess. Eric was kept in custody during the investigation because it seemed he was pretending and not telling the truth. On the day he was arrested, a local TV crew found out and went to the auto repair shop where he worked. They interviewed his manager and colleagues, who revealed that he was absent from work at the time of the murder. Surprisingly, while they were there, the shop manager received a call from Eric, who was calling from prison. Eric informed his employer that he was in trouble and couldn't come to work. He also asked his boss to lie to the police, saying he was at work at the time. His boss then asked if he had really killed Ernest. Then, he shared a shocking story. He admitted to pulling the trigger and shooting Ernest, but claimed he was persuaded to do so by Tina, an employee who was also Loretta's driver. It turned out that Tina and Eric were lovers, and she had asked him to help with the crime. He claims that Loretta is the one behind it all. Eric claimed that Loretta lied and went to church during the crime to create a false alibi. She waited there until Ernest was killed. Afterward, Eric called Tina from prison to discuss details of the crime. A few hours later, a recording of this conversation reached the police station. Investigators needed to verify if Eric was truthful, if Tina and Loretta were involved in the murder. On July 28, Tina was brought in as a suspect. She denied any involvement and claimed ignorance of the incident, but her motives remained very suspicious. Ernest had always been very kind to Tina's, providing housing for her family and giving her a job with a stable income. In her situation, it would be wise to maintain this relationship for as long as possible. Why would she kill her benefactor? It seemed illogical. However, detectives suspected she was lying. To confirm, they searched her belongings and found a bank card belonging to Ernest in her purse. Checking the database, the police discovered that months before the murder, Ernest and Loretta had filed a complaint against Tina for stealing money. Eventually, they decided to forgive her without prosecution. Tina confesses that she continues to steal Ernest's money. Her husband, Chris, revealed that the night before the crime, she did not stay at home because they had a fight and she went to a hotel. It turned out that Tina had spent the night there with Eric, planning the attack on Ernest. After several hours of interrogation, she confessed that Eric murdered Ernest, but she claimed that Loretta was the mastermind. Loretta had approached Tina, saying that Ernest should die. Initially, she refused, but Loretta coerced her into participating. The motive for the crime was financial. Shortly before his death, Ernest had promised to pay off his granddaughter's tuition debts, i.e. Katie's daughter. The granddaughter was at risk of being expelled over a $50 shortfall, and Katie was struggling financially. However, when it came time to fulfill his promise, Ernest refused to pay the $50. Loretta was so angry that he was so stingy that she thought he deserved to die. Afterwards, Loretta asked Tina and Eric for help, promising to pay $11,000. The crime was meant to look like a robbery, so Loretta allowed Eric to take Ernest's gun and personal belongings. Consequently, the gun and several valuables were missing from the house. Eric stole the murder weapon from their home and disposed of it. Of course, Tina and Eric's testimony was not enough to arrest Loretta. Before arresting Loretta, Tina was asked to call her. Her task was to talk to Loretta and try to get Loretta's to confess. She agreed because she wanted to make a deal with the prosecution to reduce her sentence. She also needed to testify against Eric and Loretta. Then, she phoned Loretta, the police recorded and listened to the call. According to the plan, she said that Eric would be released on bail in an hour. So, she needed $1,000 to cover his bail costs. Loretta agreed to pay and asked for more time to get the money. This provides evidence of Loretta's relationship with Tina and Eric, but could not obtain a confession to the murder. Ernest's funeral was held on July 29th. After the ceremony, Loretta was arrested as she left the cemetery. She was accused of hiring Eric to kill her husband, Ernest, and taken to the police station for questioning. Despite the accusations, she denied any involvement. The police pressured her, claiming she attended church that day, knowing Ernest would be killed. They alleged that she had orchestrated the crime. However, she remained firm, stating she attends church every Sunday. She also acted confused, repeatedly asking what she was guilty of. There is no concrete evidence against her, other than a phone call. It doesn't prove much. Loretta repeatedly claimed that she was always in church during the time of the crime. She mentioned her Alzheimer's disease and called the idea of her killing her husband absurd. She suggested that Tina, who had previously stolen money, may be involved in Ernest's murder. However, she denied any involvement herself. Her daughter, Katie, supported her claims and often shared this perspective with journalists. Even Ernest's family believed Loretta was not involved, pointing to her harmonious relationship with Ernest over the years. However, they later informed the police that they suspected Katie and insisted Katie should be more thoroughly investigated. It seems money is the motive. Ernest's farm was valued at around $1.5 million. Upon his death, the farm would pass to Loretta, and after her death, it will be passed on to Katie. Therefore, Katie focuses more on Ernest's assets. Because of this, Ernest's relatives decided to take the case to court. Nonetheless, Katie had a copy of Ernest's will, which allocated the property to Katie and her daughters, leaving the entire Ernest's family out of the inheritance. However, the dates in the will have many suspicious points. It was signed just 3 weeks before Ernest's death. His relatives believed it was either forged or that he was coerced into signing it while unaware of his actions. Consequently, they decided to contest the will in August 2010. By then, the investigation into Ernest's murder was nearly complete. There were 3 suspects: Loretta, believed to be the mastermind, Tina, an accomplice, and Eric, the executor of the plan. However, detectives suspected a 4th person might be involved. This was Katie, who had the strongest motive and stood to gain the most from the tragedy. Ernest's family insists that he will not pass on his inheritance to Loretta's stepdaughter, Katie. Ernest's family is certain that he wouldn't leave his inheritance to Loretta's stepdaughter, Katie. Ernest was known for being very frugal, even stingy. He wouldn't spend money carelessly or leave his family without an inheritance. Besides, he never had a close relationship with Katie, so there was no way he would leave everything to her. While the prosecution was preparing to try Loretta, Tina, and Eric, Ernest's family filed a lawsuit claiming inheritance rights. By then, the battle over the inheritance had been ongoing for several months. As police looked into the details of the incident, they began to suspect foul play. The main goal is to prove that Katie's copy of the inheritance will is a forgery. The copy of the will bears the highly suspicious signature of a notary named Penny Penner. On October 19th, the police came to see Penny, the notary. She initially claimed that she had signed the documents on July 1st, nearly a month before Ernest's death. She stated that she signed them at home, in the presence of several witnesses, including Loretta. However, she later confessed that the will was indeed forged, as she signed it after Ernest's death. When pressured, she revealed that Katie had come to her after Ernest was murdered. According to Penny, Katie explained that Ernest had died suddenly without having time to properly draft the will and that he had no living relatives to claim the inheritance. Katie was concerned that her mother, Loretta, who suffers from Alzheimer's disease, will have difficulty registering property, resulting in the property belonging to the state. The notary Penny feeling sympathy for Katie. She did not investigate the true circumstances and decided to help her. However, facing criminal charges, she chose to disclose the truth to the investigators. To avoid legal issues, she agreed to assist the detective by making several phone calls to Katie. Her task was to get Katie to confess to forging the documents. Following the plan, she called Katie, claiming she had problems with the police and needed details of the incident to draft a new document to distract the investigation. Katie answered several questions, which led to her conviction for involvement in the forgery of the will. The police had enough evidence to search Katie's house in San Antonio. They came to search for documents related to her forging of the will. When the officers entered, Katie reached for her purse. Fearing she might have a weapon, they handcuffed her. However, the purse contained no gun, only a letter with instructions for creating a fake, which she intended to destroy. In the house, they discovered boxes of documents, including copies of power of attorney for the house and notes regarding Ernest's health. It appeared she had been monitoring him for a long time, possibly waiting for the right moment to act. The police hoped to find evidence that she was involved in Ernest's murder, but they found nothing. Investigators suspected she had planned the murder with Loretta, but lacked direct evidence. Ultimately, they had to release Katie and remove her handcuffs. However, they did not give up. Instead, they decided to change their approach. After visiting Katie's house, the investigators decided to change their approach. Meanwhile, Loretta had been in jail for a long time without bail. Her Alzheimer's disease was worsening, and she was declared incompetent to stand trial due to her health. Consequently, she was sent to a psychiatric hospital for criminals indefinitely. During this time, she confessed, but her confession was not considered significant because of her condition. At the trial, the prosecution doubted that Loretta could have planned the crime alone. It seemed clear that she had assistance, probably from her daughter, Katie. After that, investigators focused on Eric Crane. In June 2011, he pleaded guilty to the crime in exchange for life sentences without the possibility of parole, thus avoiding the death penalty. As part of the deal, Eric was required to testify against everyone involved in the crime. Then, the detectives pressured Tina by threatening that they would find a way to get her the death penalty. This pressure was enough to make her confess. She pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against the other conspirators. Her interrogation was recorded on video, exposing criminal activities. Tina revealed that Loretta planned the crime and convinced her to kill Ernest. Katie was also aware of the plan and conspired with Loretta. In return, Loretta promised Tina that she and her family could live in Ernest's house indefinitely. More than a year had passed since Ernest's murder, and finally, the investigation had gathered all the necessary evidence. On March 2, 2012, the police returned to San Antonio and went to Katie's house. They forced their way in, breaking down the door. Katie's husband watched as she was handcuffed and taken away. On April 25, 2013, Katie appeared in court. She accused of committing murder in July 2010. She faced the possibility of life imprisonment without parole. The prosecution argued that her sole motive was to take over Ernest's farm. At first, she intended to put him in a nursing home to take over the house. She planned to fabricate a story about a scandal with the neighbors, then trick him into signing the power of attorney. When this plan failed, she allegedly turned to a more violent alternative. By this time, Loretta's Alzheimer's disease had progressed, but Ernest remained in good health. Katie had always had a poor relationship with him, and it was clear that he would deny her an inheritance if her mother, Loretta, died first. This gave her a motive to eliminate him, with one theory suggesting the murder was staged to look like a failed robbery. At trial, Tina claimed that she was forced to participate in the case without any other choice. She stated that Katie pressured and threatened her, trying to persuade her by promising payment. However, Tina's testimony was not convincing to the prosecutor's office. The prosecution's other key witness was Eric. Contrary to expectations, Eric testified that discussions about the murder plan only involved Tina. He claimed he never discussed it with Katie or Loretta, but suspected Loretta's involvement. Later, he added that if Katie had been involved, he would have known, but he was hearing about her involvement for the first time. The defense presented arguments to prove Katie's innocence by focusing on document forgery. According to the lawyer, Katie had indeed used a notary's services to prevent her mother from receiving an inheritance, but this has nothing to do with the murder. Loretta did not attend the hearings due to health issues. The prosecution played a recording of Loretta's testimony where she admitted involvement in the murder, but she didn't mention anything about Katie. On May 14, 2013, after just an hour and a half of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Katie Passaniti was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and forging multiple documents. She received a life sentence without parole. As they left the courtroom, Ernest's family thanked each juror for their decision. They succeeded in contesting the will and inherited Ernest's entire estate. Despite this, Katie continued to assert her innocence, visibly shocked and fearful after the verdict. Tina, who cooperated with the prosecution, avoided the death penalty but was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Loretta continued her treatment until her death and never appeared in court. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sandra Gallas. Sandra was born on May 15, 1978 in Japan. Her background was a mix of half Japanese, a quarter Hawaiian, and a quarter Portuguese. Sandra had an older brother, Lawrence, who always looked out for her. After Larry retired early from the military, her parents, Larry and Tashi, decided to move to Hawaii. Turns out, Hawaii is Larry's hometown. They settled on the island of Kauai, fulfilling their long-held dream of living in Hawaii. They instantly fell in love with the stunning island and found the locals to be extremely kind and welcoming. By the age of 4, Sandra was practicing gymnastics, and by 5, she was learning the traditional Hawaiian hula dance. She studied very well and became a very beautiful girl. Sociable, cheerful, and active, she made many friends. After graduating from high school, Sandra attended New York University to study journalism. Although she dreamed of becoming a journalist, her life took a different path. As someone from an island, she found New York City overwhelming, with its towering, makes her feel suffocated. She didn't enjoy living there and visited her parents in Hawaii, missing them greatly. After graduating, Sandra returned to Hawaii, where she met Darren Gallas, who was working as a builder at the time. Darren was captivated by Sandra's beauty, and they began dating in 1999. With her parents' blessing, they got married, and Sandra took his last name. They bought their own house on the island of Kauai. They appeared to be a happy, loving family. Sandra and Darren had 2 sons. A year after their wedding, they welcomed their first child, Austin. 2 years later, their youngest son, Braden, was born. Sandra took care of the children and managed the household. She and Darren love their sons very much and always try to do the best for them. However, their relationship gradually deteriorated. In 2005, Sandra discovers Darren has been having affairs with 2 married women. She found their phone numbers among his belongings. After she called them, they confessed to having affairs with Darren. She decided to end the marriage and filed for divorce. She could not bear his infidelity any longer. In June 2005, Darren moved out of the family home, while Sandra and their children remained there. Sandra changes her hairstyle to enter a new phase of life. Sandra started working as a waitress at a restaurant on the island to support herself and her children. Her goal was to become financially independent and no longer rely on Darren. Sandra's kind, polite, and friendly nature made her a favorite among the restaurant's guests and staff. It was there that she met Ryan Shinjo, a chef. He was calm, polite, and courteous, the exact opposite of Darren. As they spent more time together, a romance blossomed. Sandra felt comfortable and at ease with him, something she hadn't had in a long time. Ryan made her happy, and their relationship grew deeper and deeper. On weekends, they would often take trips to Honolulu. And Ryan would shower her with gifts. Sandra's parents were overjoyed to see their daughter happy again after a difficult divorce. Sandra and Ryan had plans to move in together, but unfortunately, those plans were not meant to be. Soon, tragedy struck. On January 25, 2006, 27-year-old Sandra was brutally murdered. That morning, before going to work, Ryan visited her. But when he knocked on the door, there was no answer. This was unusual, because they had agreed that he would stop by to visit her before going to work. He began checking the area around the house to understand what was going on and found that the garage door was closed and the lights were still on, meaning someone must be inside. He thought it was Sandra and that she simply hadn't heard the knocking at the door. Ryan looked out the garage window, and he saw a strange sight inside. Inside the car, Sandra was half lying down and unresponsive. Concerned that she might be suffocating from exhaust fumes, he screamed and called her name. But she did not answer. Panicked, he rushed to a neighbor's house, about half a kilometer away, for help. Together, they managed to open the garage door. Upon entering, he touched Sandra. He found her body was already cold. Immediately, he called 911 to report that Sandra was not showing any signs of life. Sandra, 27, was pronounced dead by paramedics. Police began examining her body, which was found inside the car. She was partially lying down, with her lower body in the driver's seat and her upper body thrown back onto the front passenger seat. It was clear that Sandra had been dead for some time and had been attacked. Her body showed signs of beating and had lacerations on his neck, indicating that she had been murdered. Forensic experts searched the crime scene for evidence, but found none. There were no CCTV cameras or witnesses in the area. Police suspected that Sandra had been trying to escape from someone, as it appeared she had been in a hurry to leave. She had been getting ready quickly, got into the car, but didn't have time to drive away. Instead, she was attacked, knocked down, and strangled. Investigators found no signs of robbery in the house. Valuables were still in their places, and there was no sign of disarray. Sandra was not raped, so what could have been the motive for the murder? Meanwhile, Sandra's parents were visiting their son in Texas and never imagined that something like this would happen to their daughter. In the morning, Sandra's boss called her because she hadn't shown up to work. This worried them, as Sandra was always known to be hardworking and responsible. When her parents tried calling her, she didn't answer. By evening, they received the devastating news about their daughter's murder and rushed back home. The brutal killing shocked everyone on the island. The locals were scared and worried that a serial killer might be on the loose on the island, posing a threat to them. People asked the police to explain, but the authorities reassured the people. They believed it was a crime with a personal motive, meaning it was intentional and targeted. Hawaii generally has a very low crime rate compared to the national average, except for certain disadvantaged areas on the island of Oahu. Detectives were committed to solving the case quickly to reassure the island's residents. Investigators believe the brutal nature of the death suggests a personal motive, so they considered ex-husband and current lovers as suspects. Ryan, the current lover, discovered Sandra's body. Darren, her ex-husband, had a strained relationship with her, and their divorce was nearing finalization. Darren is very sad about their divorce, and he became enraged upon learning about her affair with Ryan. Additionally, Darren and she was embroiled in a heated custody battle, which caused constant conflict. As a result, investigators questioned both suspects, Darren and Ryan, at the scene. First, they interrogated Darren. He stated that the day before the incident, he had picked up the children according to the court-ordered schedule. He took them to kindergarten in the morning, painted his mother's room while they were away, and then picked them up, spending a pleasant time with them. Darren claimed that when Sandra was supposed to pick up the children in the afternoon after work, but instead, the police came to him with bad news about her death. Darren claimed he was not involved in Sandra's death. Even though they are divorced, they still maintain a peaceful relationship and keep in touch for the sake of their children. Initially, he spoke confidently, but his actions showed the opposite. In the middle of the interrogation, he became nervous, confused his statements, and raised the police's suspicions. He could not provide verifiable alibis. At the time of the tragic incident, their children were too young to give statements, being only 3 and 5 years old. According to Darren, he was home alone at the time. But he failed the polygraph test. Turns out, he never called Sandra to check why did she come home late, which was unusual, leading investigators to suspect him of Sandra's murder. A search warrant for his home has been issued. The police discovered that a room remained unpainted, contradicting his claims. This suggested he might have had the opportunity to go to Sandra and kill her. After thoroughly inspecting the house, investigators found nothing relevant to the case. Despite their suspicions, the detective had to let Darren go home. They interviewed people close to he and Sandra, including her parents, all suspected him of having something to do with her death. He was known to be extremely jealous and controlling. He did not want to leave her and opposed the divorce until the last minute. Sandra had no enemies. Her family and relatives believe that Darren is the only person who could be her killer. Sandra's new lover, Ryan, provided an alibi. Although he failed a polygraph test, he was removed from the list of suspects. An autopsy revealed that Sandra died from strangulation, with characteristic marks on her neck and hemorrhages in her eyes. Her body also showed multiple injuries, indicating a painful death. Detectives were convinced that Darren was directly involved in her death, but they lacked the evidence to prove it. 2 years later, Sandra's undershirt was re-examined. During this detailed investigation, DNA was found and sent for analysis. The results revealed that Darren's DNA was present on her undershirt. This led authorities to consider charging him with murder, as it was considered vital evidence. However, the prosecutor decided against pursuing charges due to insufficient evidence. Before the murder, they were in regular contact and saw each other, especially when he came to pick up the children. Therefore, it is possible that his DNA accidentally got on her clothes without being related to the murder. The children, Austin and Braden, lived with their father, Darren. He had been granted full custody. The loss of their mother, Sandra, at such a young age was a significant shock for them. Austin and Braden's maternal grandparents have requested custody of the 2 children, citing Darren's aggressive behavior and his endangerment of the children. They believed he was responsible for Sandra's death and accused him of alienating the children from their grandparents. Despite these accusations, the court awarded full custody to Darren. He later married his new girlfriend, Kyron, and moved on with his life. As time passed, the investigation made no progress. Sandra's parents maintained regular contact with investigators, determined to seek justice for their daughter. From the moment he learned of Sandra's murder, her father vowed to continue to find the culprit so that he could be punished by the law. Thanks to the persistence of Sandra's parents and their close cooperation with the police, the case was eventually solved. The family offered a $20,000 reward to anyone providing information leading to the arrest and conviction of their daughter's killer, but still no one spoke up. It was not until 2012 that a team of investigators was assigned to look into the case. They reviewed all the materials with a fresh perspective and discovered some other details. In the documents, they found letters from Sandra to the attorney handling her divorce. These letters showed that her relationship with Darren was very strained. The letters revealed that she was afraid of his aggressive behavior. He had threatened her, was unhappy about her new relationship, and had harassed her. The most important evidence is the sign that Darren is a fussy person. Sandra mentioned that he was so meticulous and organized in everything he did, to the point that he wrote down in his diary every time she was upset about something, no matter how minor. This information intrigued the police, causing them to return to Darren's house to find and examine the diary. When they found out, they were shocked because he had kept detailed notes of every complaint about Sandra. He recorded every day of their life. For instance, he noted when she was 5 minutes late for a meet or bought the wrong kind of bread. However, there were no entries on the day before the murder, which puzzled the police because they knew he and Sandra had met, making it hard to believe that such a picky person would have no complaints to record. Sandra did not pick up the children on the day she died. Why didn't Darren note this in his diary or try to contact her? Perhaps he already knew she was dead and wouldn't be coming. Darren said he did not remember clearly what happened that day, which is why there is no diary entry for that day, even though he recalls other details clearly. His behavior seemed odd and unbelievable. Researchers speculated that he killed Sandra because he didn't want a divorce. In October 2012, Darren was charged with second-degree murder, with bail set at $1 million. He managed to post bail, allowing him to stay home during the trial preparation. Darren maintained his innocence. His lawyer pointed out that there was no evidence against him except DNA on the clothes, which might have ended up there for legitimate reasons, as he often picked up the children. All other evidence was circumstantial. Despite disagreements with Sandra, but they had reached an agreement on the division of property and shared custody. Therefore, the defense argued Darren had no motive to kill her. Additionally, Darren's attorney asked investigators to turn their attention to Ryan Shinju, who was romantically involved with Sandra at the time of her death. Ryan had a criminal history related to burying illegal substances. However, he denied all accusations against him, citing an alibi for the time of Sandra's death. He also cooperated fully with the investigation. He attributed his past criminal record to youthful mistakes and emphasized that he has not committed any offenses since then and has shown no inclination toward violence. Sandra's relatives and friends, called as witnesses for the prosecution, supported Ryan's statements. They described him as a kind person who Sandra felt very comfortable around. None of them believed Ryan could commit murder, especially since he had no motive. However, they had a different opinion about Darren. Darren was a cruel and domineering. He was someone Sandra feared. She avoided seeing him to avoid angering him. By court order, Sandra was forced to give Darren the opportunity to communicate with the children, even though she did not want to. Ryan added that he and Sandra planned to move in together for her protection against Darren. He suspects Darren is the person behind the crime, although there is no direct evidence. During the trial, Darren was portrayed poorly and was likely to be convicted. On his lawyer's advice, Darren accepted a plea bargain from the prosecution to reduce his sentence. This decision disappointed Sandra's family, but the prosecutor argued that a plea deal was the better option because without enough evidence, Darren could be acquitted. The prosecutor estimated a 50% chance of conviction, so Sandra's family agreed to the plea deal. In May 2018, 12 years after Sandra's murder, Darren pleaded guilty to first-degree assault on his wife, causing serious bodily harm. He did not provide any details about the crime. He was sentenced to imprisonment with the possibility of parole after serving 85% of his sentence. In March 2022, his minimum term was reduced by 6 months. He may be eligible for parole in 8 years, with the earliest release date being May 2, 2026, and the latest May 1, 2028. He is currently serving his sentence in prison. Sandra's parents are still upset by the sentence, considering it unfair that Darren received only 8 to 10 years for a brutal murder. They believe he acted in a calculated, planning everything meticulously. He allegedly cleaned the crime scene thoroughly, wore gloves, and hid all evidence. He also provided a false, claiming he was painting walls, which was later proven untrue. Now that Sandra's parents are over 80, they live a peaceful and steady life. Her father had several heart attacks due to severe stress after losing his daughter. His biggest wish was to see Darren put in jail. Their son, Lawrence, often visits them from Texas. Sandra's parents hope Darren will one day feel remorse for his actions. Sandra lived a respectable life. Her children are now adults, living independently, no contact with maternal family, so little is known about them. Sandra's parents think Darren is the one who turned her children against her and her maternal family. During the trial, Sandra's children, then adults, sided with Darren and his parents. They do not believe that their father killed their mother. They attended all the hearings and, after Darren was convicted, cut ties with their mother's family. They believe that their mother's family put their father in prison. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Neville and June Bamber. June and Neville became the owners of White House Farm. A Royal Air Force veteran, after many years of service, he transitioned to a position as the master of a small local court. In 1949, June married he at the age of 25, and that same year, they moved into their new farmhouse. Their dream is to have children and build a happy, close family. However, June could not get pregnant. After numerous attempts, they discovered that the issue was genetic, and they would not be able to have biological children. However, they did not lose hope and they were able to find a way to become parents. The Bamber family adopted 2 children from an orphanage. First, they adopted Sheila, who was just 3 months old, and a few years later, they adopted 6-month-old Jeremy. June and Neville cared for and educated their adopted children conscientiously, giving them all their love and tenderness. As Sheila and Jeremy grew up, they ensured they received a good education by sending them to prestigious private schools with high-quality standards. The Bambers' financial situation was very good, allowing them to take care of themselves and their children fully and comfortably. Like any family, June and Neville also faced problems in their relationship. Not having a biological relationship with your children can sometimes make the situation more complicated. However, for the most part, their family life proceeded smoothly, without any major conflicts. In 1985, Sheila was 28, Jeremy was 24, and their adoptive parents, June and Neville, had just turned 60. That summer was so peaceful, with everyone enjoying the sun and nature, until the early hours of August 7th. At 3:30 a.m., Jeremy was awakened by an unexpected phone call. When he answered, he was shocked when he heard his father, Neville, on the other line. Neville's voice was frantic and distressed. He struggled to explain that Sheila had gone crazy and have weapons. While Jeremy still didn't fully understand what was going on, the call suddenly lost connection. Alarmed, Jeremy immediately contacted the police, relaying what Neville had said. He also warned them that Sheila could be dangerous. Despite the urgency, it took the police an hour and a half to arrive at the scene. By then, it was still dark, and the house was shrouded in shadows. The area was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos Neville had described. Since firearms were reportedly involved, the police approached cautiously, adhering to standard procedures. Then, they decided not to enter the house. Instead, they waited outside, wait for the task force to come and handle it. The police positioned themselves at a safe distance from the house and used a megaphone to try to communicate with anyone inside. For more than 2 hours, police tried to contact Bamber's family, but received no response. During this time, the police asked Jeremy to explain what had happened at the Bamber household the previous day. He explained that the entire family had gathered for dinner the night before. Toward the end of the evening, there had been a minor misunderstanding, but not serious. He also mentioned that he had left a pistol and a .22 caliber carbine with his parents. Both guns were in good working order and loaded. Nearly 3 hours after the first police officers arrived, at approximately 8 a.m., the special forces entered the house. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy and somber. The team cautiously advanced, inspecting the first floor. When they entered the kitchen, they found a scene of chaos. A chair facing down on the ground, and next to it, in a pool of blood, was Neville's lifeless body. He had been shot 8 times, 6 of which hit the head, leaving him with little chance of survival. His hands and face were bruised and scraped, with a broken nose and jaw, shows that he fought back drastic against the attacker. The officers completed their search of the first floor, then, they moving upstairs. Each step had to be made with caution to avoid noise, but this is very difficult. Because the floor is old and makes a creaking sound every time it is moved. On the second floor, in 2 bedrooms, they discovered 4 more bodies. They found June, Sheila, and 2 6-year-old boys, Daniel and Nicholas, all of whom had been fatally shot. June had been struck by 7 bullets, while Daniel and Nicholas sustained 5 and 3 shots, respectively. Sheila was found on the threshold of her parents' bedroom, with 2 gunshot wounds under her chin. In total, 25 bullets were used to kill the 5 members of Bamber family. Initially, police theorized that the Bamber family members had been deliberately killed. But who could have committed such an act? Was the perpetrator an acquaintance of the family, who had long planned to harm them and then finally carried it out? Or was the criminal so clever that he tried to fool the police with a fake clue? These questions remained unanswered, prompting the authorities to immediately begin an investigation. It is remarkable that although Sheila and Jeremy were both very well educated, they grew up with completely different personalities. Jeremy was introverted from a young age, preferred solitude, and did poorly in elementary school. Sheila, on the other hand, always had many friends around her. Jeremy is hot-tempered and has difficulty controlling his emotions. Even though his parents tried to educate him, but he still did not change. Eventually, they decided to send him to boarding school, which happened in 1970, when he was 9 years old. Boarding schools in England at that time were famous for their strict and harsh discipline, applied to all ages of students. Attending such institutions was expensive, but this was not an issue for the Bambers. As soon as Jeremy entered the boarding school, he realized he could no longer behave as he had before, as any disobedience was met with punishment. Unfortunately, he made the mistake of telling his classmates that he had come from an orphanage. His friends used that information to bully him. They often taunted him about being adopted, calling him a bastard. His years at boarding school were a challenging period for him. Although they didn't teach him many good things, they did help him improve his character somewhat. Over time, Jeremy became calmer, went on to university, and successfully graduated. Neville was extremely proud of his son and even bought him a ticket to Australia. For the next 4 years, he traveled extensively across the country, spent time living in New Zealand, and eventually returned to England in 1982. Upon his return, his parents, Neville and June, asked him to work on their farm. Along with the job, they provided him with a place to live, a cottage 6 kilometers from the farm, along with a car and a monthly salary of nearly $1,000, a generous amount for the time. They wanted to ensure that he had a comfortable life and did everything they could to support him. Additionally, they hoped he would help them when they were old. June, a very religious woman, had a hard time accepting the fact that her children had different views and attitudes about religion. Throughout her life, she did everything to guide them toward what she believed was the true path and to bring them closer to God. Unfortunately, her efforts were unsuccessful. So, she had suffered from severe depression, and her mental health had greatly deteriorated. At the time, mental health issues were treated with a crude and outdated method, administering electric shocks to the patient. It was believed that this could positively influence brain function. June's depression wasn't caused solely by her son, Jeremy. Her daughter Sheila, despite her calmer demeanor, also caused her great distress. Sheila enjoyed looking at magazines featuring models in provocative poses. Sheila dreamed of becoming a model and appearing on the cover of such magazines. However, she does not support this. But Sheila's problems don't stop there. One day, Sheila announced to her parents that she was pregnant. In many families, the news might have been met with joy, but the Bamber family is not like that. Sheila was still a teenager and unmarried, which made the situation complicated. June, her adoptive mother, faced a difficult decision. Should she pressure Sheila to have an abortion? As a Christian, June could not condone abortion, but at the same time, allowing the child to be born is unacceptable. Then, June told Sheila to make her own choice, but on the condition that if she had an abortion, no one in the family would know. This makes the relationship between June and Sheila more and more tense. In 1977, despite her parents' objections, Sheila is married to Colin Caffell. They on to have twin sons, Nicholas and Daniel. Initially, their family life seemed happy, but Sheila began to suspect Colin of infidelity. Her suspicions were correct, and she eventually filed for divorce. In 1982, they are officially divorced, which had a devastating impact on Sheila's mental health. She couldn't bear the shock from the divorce, so she fell into depression, and she was eventually admitted to a mental hospital for treatment. Nicholas and Daniel were sent to an orphanage, where they stayed for nearly 2 years. During this time, Sheila's mental health deteriorated further. She became increasingly anxious, frequently spoke about ending her own life and that of her children, whom she believed were possessed by the devil. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Meanwhile, Sheila and Jeremy seemed to swap positions with each other. Jeremy, who was a rebel for years, now lives a peaceful and stable life. In 1985, Sheila reconciled with her ex-husband, Colin. Together, they removed Nicholas and Daniel from the orphanage and start a new life together. In August, Neville and June invited Sheila and her family to visit, so they could reunite with their grandchildren, Daniel von Nicholas. They hadn't seen their 2 nephews in a long time. They decided that the family would spend a week together, after which Colin would take the boys on a trip to Norway. On Tuesday, August 6, 1985, Colin brought the boys to the family farm. And everyone gathered at the Bamber house. The day was filled with joy. There was a family dinner, a happy atmosphere, and delicious food. Later, Neville and June asked Sheila to take Daniel and Nicholas back to the orphanage, arguing that she couldn't provide them with a proper education. This suggestion angered Sheila. She replied that she would make the decision herself. The calm atmosphere of the evening was disrupted at 8:30 p.m. Around the same time, Jeremy left the house. Barbara Wilson, the secretary at Bamber Farm, called Neville regarding a work-related matter. When Neville answered, she realized he seemed very annoyed. In the background, she could hear raised voices, as though people were arguing or upset about something. This was unusual for the Bamber family, which surprised she. However, She couldn't learn more about the situation because Neville quickly ended the call and hung up. The next morning, everyone present in Bamber's house was shot dead. Jeremy, the only survivor, was informed of the tragedy. Overcome with grief, he couldn't hold back his tears. Investigators treated him with respect, allowing him time to gather himself before beginning their questioning. Jeremy shared everything he knew, including the hardships Sheila went through, and the argument that had occurred at the dinner table on the evening of August 6th, shortly before he decided to leave the house. At first glance, the crime that Sheila committed seemed to be an act of desperation and impulsivity, because at the time, she was suffering from mental illness. After hearing Neville and June's suggestion that she should return her 2 sons to the orphanage, she felt the interference in her private life was unacceptable. When she lost control, she grabbed a weapon and shot Neville, June, Daniel, Nicholas, and finally shoot yourself. Investigators believe this is what happened. However, there is one very strange detail: Sheila had been shot twice in different parts of her body. How could she have managed to do this to herself? The actions of the detectives were puzzling. They decided to burn the blood-soaked bedsheets carpet where the bodies were found. They explained that they wanted to help Jeremy avoid the painful memories of the incident. Furthermore, the weapon discovered at the crime scene, which was a key piece of evidence, was improperly handled by the investigator. They picked it up with their bare hands without wearing gloves. A few days later, Bamber's family funeral was held, and Jeremy attended. He seemed distraught over the tragedy, weeping over the coffins of his sister, parents, and nephews. However, on that day, the investigation was reopened. Relatives of Bamber's family have expressed concerns about Jeremy's unusual behavior. Despite his tears, he made odd remarks, such as referring to himself as the boss. They found him smiling with the look of someone satisfied with victory. They reported this to police, causing police to conduct a more thorough investigation. Crime scenes need to be investigated carefully and meticulously to avoid drawing hasty conclusions. The detectives began by examining the weapon. They discovered fingerprints from several individuals, including the investigator who had handled the gun without gloves. The appearance of Sheila and Jeremy's fingerprints is not surprising. Jeremy admitted the gun was his, explaining he had purchased it for hunting. It is also understandable that Sheila's fingerprints were on the gun, as the initial theory suggested she had used the gun as the murder weapon. A few days later, Jeremy's cousin secretly went to the Bamber family home to search the house. He convinced that Sheila was not involved in the murder. By this point, Jeremy had inherited to his family home and was living there alone. During the search, the cousin inspected every room and the closet, and he found a silencer for a .22 caliber carbine. Length of the gun, combined with the silencer, made it impossible for the attacker to have turned the weapon on themselves and fired. This discovery strongly suggested that Sheila could not have been the perpetrator. If Sheila had fired the gun without the silencer, a new question arises: why were traces of blood found on the end of the silencer? Sheila, who had been shot twice and was bleeding, could not have removed the silencer and hidden it deep in the closet. This suggests that the silencer was attached to the rifle in the murders. From this point, everything started to become clear. Julie, Jeremy's girlfriend, suspects him of being involved in killing his family. She contacted investigators and shared some information. She revealed that on the night of August 7th, Jeremy had called her, saying there were problems. However, when she tried to ask what was wrong, he abruptly hung up. She also recalled that shortly before the murders, he had repeatedly complained about his family. Most importantly, she revealed that the Bamber family had drawn up a will, which stated that all assets would be passed on to their children after their deaths. This made Jeremy very angry. He did not want to share the inheritance with his sister, Sheila. In addition, Jeremy also told Julie that he wanted to kill his family and blame it on Sheila, a mentally ill person. She reported all of this to the police, not because she wanted to help the investigation, but because she was feeling angry, so she had just learned that Jeremy had a new girlfriend. However, there is no direct evidence to prove Jeremy's guilt. He tried to mislead the investigation. He gave the police the name of a suspect, a plumber he'd have hired. However, when investigators questioned the plumber, they learned that he was completely innocent. He also has a solid alibi, helped to remove any suspicion against him. As a result, Jeremy Bamber became the primary suspect. He was taken into custody due to his inability to provide an alibi. However, the police released him after failing to find evidence linking him to the massacre. Surprisingly, he was allowed to leave the country. After inheriting the property, Jeremy's financial situation improved a lot. He sold Neville's car and to Saint-Tropez, France. Upon returning to England on September 29th, he was arrested and charged with the murder of the Bamber family. The trial began on October 3rd. One of the main points raised in court was about Neville's injuries. His body showed multiple bruises, suggesting that he had tried to defend himself from an attack. The medical examiner speculated that the injuries were caused by the same .22 caliber carbine. Sheila, a petite and frail woman, it seemed unlikely that she could have inflicted such severe injuries on her father. In contrast, Jeremy appeared capable of doing so. Neville's body showed signs of a struggle, with multiple bruises. Sheila also received several blows, but there were no signs of a struggle on her body, and her nails remained intact. The defense countered these arguments, that believed that Sheila suffered from mental illness, which made her the prime suspect, capable of committing a five-fold murder. They emphasized that she grew up on a farm, was skilled at handling guns, and was an experienced target shooter. Additionally, Jeremy's lawyers highlighted that Sheila's blood was fresher than the rest of the family's, so, they claiming that she ended her life after killing others. This, they argued, could have been due to guilt or the sound of approaching police cars. However, the prosecution disputed these claims. If Sheila had been the killer and then end her life, then the policeman on duty near the house, they will hear the last gunshot. However, no sound was detected. Furthermore, Sheila could not have pulled the trigger with the silencer attached, as it would have been out of her reach. The silencer was also found in a closet, rather than on the carbine where it logically should have been. The defense is in a difficult position because it has no arguments to refute the prosecution. According to the prosecution's argument, the motive for the murder stemmed from Jeremy's anger when he learned the contents of the will. In the will, the inheritance was divided equally between him and Sheila. His greed for the inheritance led him to plan a massacre. On August 6th, between 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m., Jeremy left his relative's house and went home. Later that night, he returned to their house on a bicycle he had taken from his mother, June, a few days earlier. He took a roundabout route and entered the house through an open bathroom window on the first floor. He climbed inside, retrieved the loaded gun, and went to June's bedroom. Then, he shot and killed her with 2 shots. Next, he aimed the gun at Neville, but Neville woke up and tried to defend himself, leading to a fight. During the struggle, he managed to shoot Neville. After killing Neville, Jeremy returned to the bedroom and killed Sheila and her 2 children, Daniel von Nicholas. He then staged the scene to make it look like Sheila was the perpetrator, he placing the carbine in her hands. With his crime complete, he left the house on his bike. He called his girlfriend, Julie, almost revealing what he had done, and then called the police to report that Neville had allegedly called him. However, if Neville was threatened with a weapon, he would contact the police, not Jeremy. Jeremy's actions seemed to make everyone feel strange. Why didn't he come to the crime scene immediately after Neville's call? After considering the evidence and various assumptions, the jury deliberated for 9 hours and reaching a verdict. Ultimately, Jeremy Bamber was convicted of 5 murders and sentenced to 5 life terms in prison with no chance of parole. Jeremy, meanwhile, maintains his innocence. Again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Marco Marialini. Marco Marialini was born on April 13, 1959, in the town of Brescia, Italy. His father worked as a builder, and his mother Maria Lini was a housewife. She was obsessed with cleanliness and constantly tidied the house. Everything had to be in its place, and any mess could cause her to have a nervous breakdown. Marco had an older sister who was 2 years older. After Marco was born, his mother felt overwhelmed and struggled to keep the house clean. She suffered from emotional distress and may have suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder, although she did not recognize her condition and never sought medical help. A month after Marco's birth, he was placed in the care of his paternal grandparents, where he lived for 2 years. His parents eventually brought him back home, believing their situation had improved and that they could handle the challenges of parenting. Once back home, Maria attempted to care for Marco, but he was very active and often caused trouble. He didn't listen to her and frequently threw tantrums. Frustrated, Maria sometimes lost her temper with him. Although Marco's father tried to step in during these conflicts, Maria dismissed his attempts. He is a calm and gentle man who always avoids conflicts with his wife to keep the peace. In the family of Marie, a serious incident occurred. Maria was trying to calm Marco, who was throwing another tantrum for no apparent reason and wouldn't stop. In a moment of frustration, she grabbed him and accidentally threw him out of an open window. Marco fell several floors and miraculously caught on the clotheslines located below, which saved his life. As Marco grew older, he gained weight. He didn't go on diets or actively try to lose weight, but he felt uncomfortable in his larger body. During his teenage years, he began to compare himself to his friends and felt disgusted by any girl who weighed more than he did. Additionally, Marco wanted his girlfriend to have a strong sex drive, equal to his own. However, finding someone who met these criteria was challenging. Most of the girls he met were either too heavy or not up to his standards. Because of this, Marco had a hard time finding a partner until he was 19, when he met Lucia. Marco and Lucia met in 1978. Lucia was short and weighed 100 pounds, and Marco fell in love with her petite figure and sought a close relationship. However, when Lucia first undressed in front of Marco, he was disappointed in her figure. Despite this, Marco continued to date her because he appreciated her calm, modest, and composed demeanor. Meanwhile, he continued to search for his ideal partner. A few months after starting their relationship, Marco joined the army and was stationed in Pisa, Italy. Believing that he would quickly find new love elsewhere, he stopped contacting Lucia. After a few months, when Lucia started dating someone new, Marco realized that he didn't want to lose her. He contacted her again and even proposed. Marco admitted that he decided to marry Lucia because he thought he could change her to fit his preferences. They got married in 1980, and soon after, Marco focused on controlling Lucia's weight. He believed that 45 kilograms was too heavy for a woman, so Lucia agreed to go on a diet. Marco restricted her food intake and weighed her regularly. When she lost weight, he praised her and expressed his love. However, if she gained weight, he became extremely harsh. After a few months, Lucia reached a dangerously low weight of 33 kilograms, which made Marco happy. Then, unexpectedly, Lucia became pregnant despite her low weight. Marco accepted this and allowed her to eat freely, he realizing that she shouldn't be restricted during her pregnancy. As Lucia's belly began to grow, Marco became unhappy with it. Their intimacy began to falter. During this time, Marco often fantasized about women who were very thin, like skeletons. He often fantasized about being able to see the woman's spine. As Lucia entered her final months of pregnancy, Marco began dating other women, especially those who were not only thin but also anorexic. However, he soon realized that these women were not right for him. Because they have unpleasant personalities and, most importantly, lack interest in intimacy. They make their own choices about food and eating, which is contrary to Marco's desire to have complete control over his diet. In 1981, Lucia gave birth to a daughter, and a year later, their family welcomed their second child. After giving birth, Lucia gained a significant amount of weight, causing Marco to increasingly distance himself from her. He found her post-pregnancy body unattractive. He eventually decided to divorce her, wanting to ensure that their children would stay with their mother. The divorce was amicable. Marco then began looking for a new partner, a journey that lasted nearly 10 years. During this time, he opened his own antique shop. In 1994, dating through newspaper ads began to become popular. Marco, 35, posted an ad describing who he was looking for. A very thin woman, not anorexic, aged 18 to 50. He received responses from 21 women and invited them on a date. Among them, he was most interested in Monica, who was from Sicily and 5 years younger than him. She was 1.72 meters tall and weighed 45 kilograms. She was friendly and outgoing. Curious about Marco's unusual ad, she decided to respond. Monica and Marco began to see each other regularly. While Monica viewed their relationship as casual, Marco wanted something more serious. He tried to convince her to move in with him. After a while, Monica decided to move in with Marco. In the same year, he started facing challenges at work. He had fallen into debt, and his antique shop was losing money. To help him, Monica lent him 76 million lira, the amount for which she sold the house. This was a large sum, considering that the average salary in Italy at that time was around 2 million lira. Although Marco proposed to Monica, she rejected him. At first, they lived as a normal couple, but after a while, Marco began to interfere with her diet. He said that a 1.72 m tall girl weighing only 33 kilograms was beautiful. But he set her goal weight at 38 kilograms. Monica agreed, Marco still secretly hoping she would reach 33 kilograms. It is unclear why he set that number. Marco limited Monica's meals to once a day, usually consisting of a plate of green salad or vegetables. He monitored the food in their house, marking the cereal jars and making sure Monica did not eat anything without his knowledge. He weighed her several times the day and became angry if he noticed her gaining a significant amount of weight. If her weight increased, he would force her to vomit and sometimes resort to physical violence. On weekends, the couple often eats out. Marco enjoys a hearty meal, ordering an appetizer, a second course, and a dessert. Monica, on the other hand, limits herself to a vegetable salad without dressing or unsweetened green tea. This is her routine, even on holidays. After a few months of dieting, she reached her goal weight, but soon after, her weight started to climb to 40 kilograms. Monica kept her diet a secret from everyone, including her parents and friends. As she began to lose weight, her relatives noticed and began to ask about her health. To avoid their questions, she changed the subject and eventually isolated herself, cutting off all contact with her friends and ignoring their calls. Over time, her health deteriorated. She felt weak, had no motivation to get out of bed, and her period stopped. Monica was constantly hungry and obsessed with food. She resorted to stealing, sneaking small dry crackers that Marco never counted. One day, she even ate a whole raw onion. When the Marco discovered that food was missing, he punished Monica severely. He forced her to have sex, physically abused her, and made her sleep on the floor. After 2 years of enduring this treatment, Monica felt completely drained. She finally made the decision to leave the house. When she told Marco that she wanted to end their relationship and return to her parents, he responded by saying that she would have to kill him for that to happen. He then threatened her with brutal revenge if she attempted to escape. In the spring of 1996, Marco and Monica went to a restaurant. Marco ordered a plate of spaghetti, while Monica chose a green salad and asked for no oil or seasoning. While they were waiting for their food, Marco said he needed to go to the bathroom. After Marco left the table, Monica suddenly took his plate of spaghetti and started eating it ravenously. When Marco returned from the restroom, he became extremely angry at Monica's actions. He snatched the plate from her hands and demanded that she calm down. In response, Monica rushed into the restaurant's kitchen, where the cooks and waitstaff were busy. She grabbed a plate of food and began eating with her hands. Marco found her there and brought her back to their table. He shouted at her and then slapped her hard across the face. The restaurant staff and other customers were puzzled and merely watched the chaotic scene in silence. After returning home, Marco decided to punish Monica. He stripped her and told her to sleep on the floor while he went to the bedroom to sleep comfortably in his warm bed. That night, Monica picked up a heavy hammer and attacked Marco while he was sleeping, hitting him on the head before fleeing the house. Hours later, Marco woke up with a severe headache and saw blood near him. Realizing that Monica was gone, he ran to his neighbor, who called an ambulance. Marco was taken to the hospital. Fortunately, he was not seriously injured and recovered fairly quickly. The police arrested Monica and took her into custody. During the interrogation, Marco defended Monica, acknowledging that he had been cruel to her. Marco said that there had been some misunderstandings in their relationship and that they would work things out. At trial, Monica was found guilty and sentenced to 2 years of house arrest. She then moved to her parents' home in Domodossola, a city in northern Italy, 200 kilometers away from Marco's home. During her house arrest, Monica was still able to use a phone. Although she never contacted Marco, he called her regularly. At first, he seemed concerned, showing concern for her well-being. However, over time, his calls became too frequent. During one conversation, Marco confessed that he could not live without her and wanted to see her again. Monica rejected his advances, but he persisted. In 1997, Marco wrote and published his first book, The Anorexia Hunter. The original cover photo that Marco chose featured a healthy, chubby man holding a skinny woman. He based the characters on the American cartoon Popeye the Sailor. However, due to copyright issues, Marco was unable to use the image, so the publisher released the book with a different cover. Marco has publicly stated that the book is an autobiography that reflects his real life. He expressed that he felt deprived of love and care since he was a child. He has a complicated relationship with his mother. Although he hates her, he sometimes feels affection for her. Marco describes his father as a weak and indecisive man. Marco wrote about his relationship with Lucia. In the book, he called Monica Barbara. He discussed the theme of control and power over girls. According to the story, the author killed Barbara. During the book's launch, Marco publicly declared himself a monster who needed to be stopped. An editorial writer who was present at the event found Marco's tone very offensive. After reading the book, the editorial writer went to the police to express his concerns. However, the police dismissed his report, believing that Barbara's murder was completely fictional. At the time, Marco had no criminal record, making it impossible to charge him based solely on the content of his book. When Marco's autobiography was released, Monica was still under house arrest for another year. Marco sent her a signed copy of his book with the message, "Love and Hate." He continued to call her, and Monica recorded their conversations on a dictaphone. Concerned about his mental health, she urged Marco to see a doctor. During his therapy sessions, Marco opened up about his obsessive thoughts and troubling fantasies, revealing the truth about his life. He was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for several weeks, but after his treatment, he returned home feeling disillusioned with medicine, realizing that the medication had not helped him. In 1998, Monica, who was 29 years old, was finally released from house arrest and allowed to travel around the country. Marco continued to contact her, pleading for a meeting. Although Monica initially refused, she realized that he wouldn't give up easily. Eventually, she agreed to one last meeting with him but specified her conditions. It had to be during the day in a crowded place. On July 14, 1998, Monica met Marco at a small beach in Verbania on the shores of Lake Maggiore, where young couples were swimming and sunbathing. They talked for a while, but then Marco began to pressure her to return to their previous relationship. Monica stood firm in her refusal, and in response, Marco started to threaten her. Monica and Marco were sitting on the shore when she suddenly stood up and ran away. Marco quickly caught up with her and knocked her to the ground. She screamed for help, but he covered her mouth with his hand. Although there were many witnesses, no one intervened. Marco then took out a knife and stabbed Monica 22 times, killing her on the spot. The witnesses called the police, but by the time the ambulance and police arrived, Marco had already swum out to sea. Officers using a lifeboat on the beach caught Marco. During questioning, Marco admitted to his crime, claiming that he had no intention of killing Monica. He said that he came to the beach hoping to convince her to return to the relationship. If she refused, he planned to kidnap her using his car parked nearby. Police found ropes, chains, knives, locks, and duct tape, suggesting a premeditated plan that ultimately failed. Marco denied wanting to run away after the murder. He mentioned that he tried to end his life but failed. During the investigation, comic book drawings were discovered in his home. In these drawings, he depicted himself as a large ball and the girl as a thin line. His artwork expressed mockery towards women. During his conversation with the journalist, Marco showed no remorse for his crime, stating that he felt he had no other option and did what he had to do. However, Marco acknowledged that he posed a danger to society. Marco Mariolini was found to be sane and guilty of murder, he receiving a 30-year prison sentence. While incarcerated, there was a time when he refused to eat, took laxatives, and lost weight down to 44 kilograms, but later he regained it. He was a problematic inmate, starting a fire in his cell and causing minor trouble for the guards. As a result, he was transferred to different prisons multiple times. Marco wrote letters claiming he should not be released because he would kill again, but he later denied this and then wrote similar letters once more. Italian director Matteo Rone was inspired by Marco's horror stories to create the film First Love. Released in 2004. Although it did not receive major awards, it drew attention to Marco's past. In 2021, there was an article written about Marco's early release and it was revealed that he had been transferred to a mental hospital. In late 2002, journalists approached Marco for an interview. During the interview, he expressed a desire to forget his past experiences with women. The journalists noticed that he seemed confused, often unable to answer their questions. His mental state may have been affected by the effects of medication. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kathy Sposito. Kathy Sposito is a young girl who has always been close to her parents. Kathy's parents divorced while she was still in school, but despite this separation, she remained close to both her mother and father. Kathy, after completing her schooling, intended to further her education and build a career in the field of environmental security. She had a deep concern for environmental issues and aspired to contribute towards the betterment of humanity To finance her goals, she took up a job to save money for her relocation. With high ambitions, she set out to find a more suitable place to live. In early 1987, Kathy moved from Brooklyn to Prescott, Arizona, USA. The region was renowned for its scenic beauty, untamed natural landscapes, and opportunities for those seeking to fulfill their dreams. At the time, Kathy was 23 years old. In Prescott, Kathy planned to earn a degree in environmental protection while working as a waitress at a local restaurant to support herself. Kathy was determined to be financially independent and not rely on her parents for money. She rented an apartment, paid her own tuition, and prided herself on being self-sufficient. She was described as a kind, caring, and understanding person. Kathy's life was just beginning, and a bright future lay ahead of her. Tragically, her life came to an abrupt end. After moving to Prescott, Kathy decided to take a walk around the local attractions on the morning of June 13, 1987. She chose a trail located on Prescott National Forest Trail 33, which is a 2-mile route through a forest and mountains. The hike takes about 2 hours, making it a good workout for tourists and athletes. Kathy did not have a car, so she planned to bike to the trail and then walk to clear her mind. Around 7 o'clock in the morning, Kathy set off, reached the trail, and locked her bike to a nearby road sign in the parking lot before beginning her hike. Unbeknownst to her, terrible danger was awaiting her. Less than an hour later, several tourists walking the trail noticed a suspicious trail on the path that looked very much like blood, stretching a significant distance before abruptly veering off into dense bushes. Following the trail, the witnesses were horrified to find Kathy's body hidden in the bushes. The area was quiet and considered safe, located just a few hundred meters from the start of the trail. The eyewitnesses immediately called the police. While waiting for police, they inspected the area and found material evidence, which they handed over to the police. Unfortunately, this may have compromised critical evidence. When police and paramedics arrived, the body was identified as Kathy Sposito, a local student. She had been the victim of a brutal attack. The crime scene was horrific. 2 large rocks with blood and hair stains were found near her body, indicating that she had been hit multiple times in the head. Additionally, marks on her face and head indicated that she had been hit with a wrench. A local tourist later picked up the wrench and gave it to the police, inadvertently contaminating the evidence. Kathy suffered a hit by bullets wound to the eye from a .22 caliber pistol and a deep stab wound to the neck. The level of violence was shocking, suggesting that the attacker did not intend for Kathy to live. The medical examiner determined that Kathy's cause of death was traumatic brain injury and subsequent blood loss. Although there were no signs of rape because Kathy was fully clothed, later reports indicated that there may have been injuries to her genitals, leading police to believe that the perpetrator may have intended to sexually assault her but was stopped before committing the act. Abel's with her, and none of her belongings were disturbed, suggesting that robbery was not the motive behind the crime. The brutality of the attack shocked the community, raising fears that a mass attack was underway. As a result, a once peaceful area became dangerous and unsafe for all. Kathy's family and friends were devastated by her death. She appeared to have no enemies and was not involved in any illegal activities. She had a clean record with no history of mental health problems. The attack appeared random and brutal, leaving even experienced police officers baffled. 3 witnesses, children playing soccer on a nearby field next to the parking lot, reported hearing screams for help. However, they were frightened and did not know how to react because there were no adults around. A man on the other side of the trail also reported hearing a woman scream, but because of the echoes around him, he could not determine where help was needed. The densely wooded area, with steep hills and foliage, provided the perfect hiding place for a criminal to hide. According to the forensic expert, Kathy's death was almost instantaneous due to the severe head injuries she sustained. Her body was then dragged into the underbrush to conceal it from view. The entire attack occurred swiftly and violently, leaving little opportunity for anyone to intervene. As the police lacked any leads or suspects, they issued a public warning to alert hikers and walkers in the area to exercise caution. Informational signs along the trail warn visitors to be careful of bush, especially in isolated areas with dense vegetation. The area around the body was carefully secured. However, the crime scene was disturbed before the investigation began. Visitors who discovered Kathy accidentally trampled and contaminated the area, including potential footprints of the perpetrator. Furthermore, the first aid given to Kathy also inadvertently removed vital evidence from the body and created additional traces. The situation became worse when some tourists directly holding a wrench were discovered at the scene, leaving their fingerprints. DNA analysis techniques were not yet developed at that time, seriously hindering the investigation. 3 days after Kathy's body was discovered, on June 16, 2015, police announced that no suspects had been identified and there was no evidence of rape. Although some evidence was found, it was contaminated, and the technology available at the time was not advanced enough to properly analyze it. In an effort to gather more information, a public appeal was placed in a local newspaper, hoping to encourage potential witnesses to come forward. Police also interviewed people who had been at the park that morning, focusing on 2 people who were closest to the scene. Police made a specific appeal to these people, assuming that they might have noticed suspicious activity. Unfortunately, no one responded to the appeal. In a subsequent effort to gather more information, police decided to re-interview witnesses, particularly children, who may have heard something that could aid the investigation. Unfortunately, their search for these people yielded no clues. In the 1990s, with the advent of DNA testing as a widely used investigative method, the police sent the evidence to a laboratory for analysis and obtained test results. It is worth noting that the accuracy of DNA testing results at that time was significantly lower than it is today, and there was a high risk of getting inaccurate data. The forensic results showed traces of DNA from Kathy and an unidentified man. Upon further investigation, the DNA matched that of the forensic expert who performed Kathy's autopsy. This aroused suspicion among the police. Despite the strange coincidence, the forensic expert was arrested and questioned. He claimed that the DNA must have been accidentally transferred during the autopsy, which was a plausible explanation. The forensic expert then presented a solid alibi, and he had no previous connection to Kathy or motive for the crime, ultimately eliminating him as a suspect. The investigation hit a dead end, and for years, the police found no new leads. The failure of the police to find the culprit and bring him to justice caused widespread outrage. In an effort to find the perpetrator, several volunteer groups formed to conduct their own investigations. They utilized social media and gathered information, but found no valuable leads. Over time, similar brutal murders did not occur. This could indicate that the attack was personally motivated, targeting Kathy, or that the perpetrator went into hiding to avoid drawing attention to himself, or perhaps moved elsewhere to continue committing crimes. A new police team was then assembled to re-examine the crime scene and collect evidence. A seasoned police officer was appointed to the investigation. A promising lead emerged in the early 2000s. However, police attention was diverted by more recent cases that took priority, hindering progress in this case. After years of no further information came to light, Kathy's brother reopened the investigation in 2016. They returned to the crime scene, interviewed park staff and visitors, and appealed to the public for any information that might help move the case forward. Kathy's relatives reached out to her former classmates and fellow students, expressing their frustration that the killer remained at large. In an effort to reinvigorate the case, the family funded the creation of several posters that were displayed on advertising boards throughout the city. They also handed out flyers with details about the murder, aiming to inform as many people as possible in the area. The widespread use of modern communication tools, social media, and news outlets helped disseminate the information. As a result, Kathy's case once again attracted the attention of the state and the public. After 30 years, a team of 6 experienced police officers was formed, determined to solve the case. However, they faced difficulties, as decades had passed since the murder, and many physical evidence and clues had been damaged or lost over time. Furthermore, the team had to deal with current cases, which limited the time they could spend analyzing evidence and following up on past testimony. The sheriff announced news about the case in a 2020 press conference, and despite the initial expectation of a breakthrough, progress was slow. A year after the sheriff's announcement, the police team investigating Kathy's case focused on analyzing DNA evidence collected in the 1990s and made a major discovery. A DNA match opened up new lines of investigation. An earlier police team was also formed, but eventually stalled. In contrast, the current police team prioritizes DNA analysis, hoping to finally close the case with Kathy's family and find the killer. The Kathy Sposito case went unsolved, despite attracting considerable attention in the 1990s. 3 years after Kathy's attack, a similar case occurred in the same area. A stranger attacked a young girl, hitting her over the head with a rock, but fortunately, her injuries were not as severe as Kathy's. The attacker dragged the girl into the bushes and raped her. The girl managed to free herself and flee, while the attacker was unable to catch up, hampered by his sagging pants. The case bore disturbing similarities to Kathy's attack, with the main difference being that the girl miraculously escaped her attacker. The second victim also reported her incident to the police, which led to an investigation. Although police collected DNA evidence, the case was ultimately closed and inconclusive. The victim, who wished to remain anonymous because she was still afraid of her attacker, provided a detailed description of the attacker. What puzzled police was that the victim believed her attacker was a teenager. Police officer Rich Winston suspects that the similar nature of the crimes and the close proximity of the attacks suggest that both attacks were likely committed by the same person. Because there was suspicion that the same perpetrator had been involved in both cases, the DNA of the perpetrator in the second victim's case was sent to a laboratory in Paran for genealogical analysis using a groundbreaking DNA technique. This method involves searching an extensive DNA database to find potential matches to relatives of the DNA owner. Using databases beyond those related to crime can help identify suspects even if they have no criminal record. Several public companies in the United States collect DNA samples from people who voluntarily submit them, often to search for their ancestors or long-lost relatives. Millions of people are in these databases, creating a huge data pool. Through the investigation, the list of potential suspects was narrowed down to 2: the Bennett brothers, who lived in Pret at the time of Kathy's attack. Notably, both brothers had troubled pasts, growing up in disadvantaged environments and having had previous run-ins with the law. Police were initially drawn to Brian Scott Bennett for his violent behavior, including a sexual assault. Born on July 30, 1970, Brian was a teenager at the time of the attack, matching the age described by another victim. However, Rich Winston, the police officer leading the case, found this difficult to accept, as the extent of Kathy's injuries led him to believe that an older, more experienced killer had been involved. Rich even questioned the lab results and requested a retest. However, the results were accurate, confirming Brian's involvement in the crime. Brian dropped out of school in Kent and spent time in Prescott, Arizona from around 1980 to 1988. In 1989, Brian joined the Army, but his service was relatively short-lived. He returned to Prescott a year later, but didn't stay for long. Over the next few years, Brian moved around, living in California, Kansas, and North Carolina. His childhood and youth were marked by difficulties. Like many young people, Brian enjoyed partying at a young age. However, this lifestyle led to trouble, and he spent a short time in prison in Arizona for forging documents and checks. Brian's sentence ended in 1993. It is a disturbing fact that since his release, Brian has been involved in 4 assaults. Although he was charged in these cases, they never went to trial due to lack of evidence. In the end, Brian was acquitted of the charges. It was believed that his first victim was Kathy, who unfortunately did not survive the attack, and the second was a girl who managed to survive on the trail. The same day, he attacked another girl at a house party. According to her statement, he got her drunk and tried to rape her. He dragged her into a spare room, locked the door, and hoped no one would hear her screams. However, the other partygoers understood the situation and broke down the door. Brian escaped through a window, but was arrested the next day. Despite the arrest, the court was unable to prove his guilt in the case. The key issue was the inconsistent testimonies from witnesses, largely due to the fact that everyone had been drinking heavily at the party. Many considered the events that unfolded to be a joke, which ultimately led to the acquittal of the extremely Brian. Given the way Brian attacked his victims, police believe he may have been involved in several crimes in the area over the years. The incident occurred in the summer of 1993. Brian kidnapped a young woman named Renee, threatened her with a knife, and attacked her in her home. He then dragged her into a car and drove away. Fortunately, Brian forgot to turn on his headlights, and a police officer pulled over. Renee immediately reported to the police that she was a victim of kidnapping. Brian was arrested and Renee was rescued. Surprisingly, however, Brian was never charged due to lack of evidence. Police have investigated several other cases involving Brian. Among them are 2 survivors of Brian's attacks. One was attacked on a trail, and the other, Renee, was abducted from her home. Both victims identified Brian as the perpetrator from a photograph. With this new information, police need to obtain a DNA sample from Brian to compare with evidence collected at the crime scene. Unfortunately, the investigation hit another snag as police struggled to locate Brian. It was later discovered that he had traveled to several states in the 1990s before returning to his hometown of Kent. There, he lived as a recluse, avoiding contact with anyone. Tragedy struck when neighbors reported a suspicious odor coming from Brian's apartment, and police found Brian dead in his home. It turned out that Brian had taken his own life about 6 months after the attack on Renee. With no suicide note or expression of remorse for Brian's heinous crime, the police continued to pursue justice. In November 2012, Brian's body was exhumed and DNA samples were collected. The results, released in March 2013, were conclusive. The sample matched DNA evidence from the crime scene, proving that Brian Scott Bennett was responsible for Kathy's death. Finally, after 36 long years, the case was closed, bringing relief to all those hoping for justice.